Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I will be the hearing examiner presiding over today's hearing. I would like to make a few remarks for the people who are in attendance that may not be familiar with the way we conduct these hearings. The date is December 13th, 2023. The purpose of today's hearing is to consider an application to amend the commercial plan development known as Bayshore Village. This project is in the Bayshore planning community. The details of the request will be explained during the applicant's presentation. My task as hearing examiner is to accept testimony and evidence from the applicant and county staff, and then later members of the public, and prepare a final recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. I will evaluate this case using the review criteria adopted in the Land Development Code. The Board of County Commissioners will be the final decision makers in this case, but in order to address them at that hearing, you must participate by coming to the podium and putting some remarks on the record at this stage, because this is where we create all the testimony and evidence. So if you'd like to preserve your opportunity to address the board, please come to the podium today. All those who testify will have to testify under oath. I will administer the oath to everyone in the room at once I conclude my introductory remarks. The hearing will proceed as follows. We'll begin with the applicant. They're representing the property owner or the contract purchaser. They will explain the request, and as part of their presentation, they will explain how their request meets the review criteria in the Land Development Code and is consistent with the Lee Plan. They will explain how the site design and conditions of approval will address all anticipated impacts. Their presentation may include numerous witnesses, some of which may be experts. Following their presentation, I will turn to county staff. The planner in this case is Adam Mendez. He prepared the staff report, which is a public record and available to you online. His recommendation was of approval, although he did make some modifications to the request in his recommendation. He prepared the staff report on behalf of the Department of Community Development. So in addition to him speaking, we may also hear from other experts in various fields that are part of Lee County Community Development. At the conclusion of those presentations, I will open up the floor to the public. At that time, I'll go through all the papers I have here, the public participation forms, and I'll call each of you up one at a time. When you come up, you may speak as long as you like. Please remain on topic and ask any questions you may have regarding the application. It's your opportunity to share any concerns you may have, and then by doing so, you give us an opportunity to clarify something you did not understand or to craft conditions that might ameliorate your concerns with regard to compatibility or something else. I urge you to organize your thoughts before you come to the podium, because you will only have one opportunity to speak. Okay, I can't allow people to keep jumping up and down, calling out, or anything like that. So please, I urge you during the presentation, you may hear something that you may not understand, or you want more information on, or you want to share your concerns about, make a note, and when you come up there, follow your notes. All questions asked by the public will be tracked by the parties, staff and the applicant. And at the conclusion of all public testimony, we will close public and we will go back to the parties, and they will need to address the issues raised by the public. The reason why we don't have questions answered in real time is what we find is a lot of people ask the same questions and they may not have been listening to the answer that an earlier person received. So we collect them all at once and then we respond to them all at once. This is a quasi-judicial hearing that is administrative in nature. So in these hearings, Florida law and the Land Development Code distinguish between parties and participants. Parties are defined as the applicant and county staff. Parties are afforded the right to cross-examination of all witnesses. Although I want to take a moment to say to the parties, please use this sparingly. If you disagree with what a witness says, please address that during either your main presentation or rebuttal. This keeps the record more concise for me when I'm reading through it and I'm trying to sort out these issues. I'm not saying you can't use it, I'm just saying use it sparingly. Neither the Land Development Code or Florida case law recognizes a right on behalf of the public to cross-examination. So to recognize such a right would, on behalf of all interested parties, would be too unwieldy. So we have found that collecting questions during public input and then responding to them at the close of public input are the most effective. Okay, following the answering of the questions, the parties will have an opportunity to offer additional information, flesh out their presentation, or make concluding remarks. If you completed a public participation form and provided your email address, you will receive a copy of my recommendation in this case via email. And you will also receive notice of the final board hearing via email the same way. If you haven't had a chance to fill out a form, you can do it during the break. And on the subject of breaks, I want to say after every hour and a half, I'll probably take a 10-minute break to allow the court reporter to rest, stretch, and all of us to kind of get some air, and then we'll resume. I'll continue until this matter until we get to close to the noon or 1 o'clock hour, and then I will break for lunch if we're still going on. And then I'll resume in the same way. Every hour and a half, I'll probably take a 10-minute break to give us all a chance to move around. I think that's everything. I'm going to administer the oath at this time. If you plan to speak on the record or submit any kind of documentations into the record, I ask that you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place into the record today will be the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. If you can't hear, please raise your hand, and I'll have my staff make adjustments so that you can hear better. Okay, I'm ready to begin.
Our first witness is Mr. Ron Inge. We have on your desk 2 copies of the PowerPoint. I know sometimes when they're longer cases, you like an extra one so you can write on it and keep one clean. So those are already provided.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner and members of the audience. My name is Ron Inge with Inge & Associates. I'm here representing the applicant with respect to the application for the Bayshore Village project. I'd like to go through some items with that in regards to that. However, before I do, Madam Hearing Examiner, my resume is on file with your office. I've been previously recognized as an expert in development-related matters, including mining, and I would ask to be so recognized for purposes of today's hearing.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you very much. As mentioned, I'm representing Bayshore Village. I have a team accompanying me today that will allow us to address the various issues raised by staff, to point out some issues that we believe that members of the public would be interested in, and try to acquaint you with some of the rationale for why some of the requests that we've made were made and what the basis for those requests are. And here those folks are. You're going to hear from them in just a little bit. First off, this particular area was designated by Lee County in 1989 for general interchange, the area in which our particular parcel of property is located. That happened, what is that, 30-some years ago? So the intent for this property to be used for general interchange purposes to serve the traveling public and the surrounding neighborhoods was laid out in 1989. That preceded the Bayshore Community Plan, which happened a few years after that. This parcel was originally zoned in 2006 for a variety of commercial and retail uses, and that zoning stands today. As mentioned earlier, this is a modification of that or an alteration of that to the proposal that we have before the hearing examiner today. One thing that I'm going to point out that all of y'all know, the area has changed substantially since 1989 and certainly since 2006. The advent of Babcock Ranch, there are other relatively large residential subdivisions in the area have changed the complexion of this particular area and this particular neighborhood. Our parcel hasn't really developed because the uses that were approved in 2006 didn't fit what we believe the traveling public may need and what the neighborhood may need as well. And so that's why we're proposing a modification of those to try to fit with something that we think folks need. Madam Hearing Examiner, we agree with the staff recommendations with the exception of 3 items, and I'll touch on those, but then our team will talk about a couple of those in more detail later. The first is the location of drive-throughs relative to the frontage parcel. On page 2 of Exhibit 2 of the memorandum, I'll pass something out to you just a minute. If I may approach the hearing examiner.
Sure.
This would be applicant's Exhibit 2, and I'll point out what it is.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm behind on my duties here.
No worries.
The PowerPoint, applicant's PowerPoint is applicant Exhibit 1. And Exhibit 2 is a page from the amended staff report.
It's the letter from Mr. Mendez to the hearing examiner dated December 4th. It's page 2 of Exhibit 2.
And that's applicant hearing Exhibit 2.
Where is this piece of property?
Okay, we're getting there. Please be patient.
To answer that question, perhaps, it's I-75, if I may approach the screen. I-75, Bayshore Road, subject property. Madam Hearing Examiner, going back to Exhibit 2, one of the items that we still disagree with staff on is the notation made in the December 4th summary from Mr. Mendez to the hearing examiner about drive-throughs in the southern portion of the property be located only on the east side of the building. From a site design standpoint, we're not really sure what folks may want or what may fit their model. So I simply took that exhibit, page 2 of Exhibit 2, and just crossed through limited to east side of the buildings. That's our only, actually that's our only disagreement with staff on the suggested and recommended uses for the property. That's the only change. So that is to allow flexibility in site design is primarily the reason for requesting that that be stricken.
So that's the applicant's only disagreement on staff's recommended revisions to the list of permitted uses.
That's correct. And in light of that, I would like to take the opportunity to thank staff for all their effort in this regard and working with all the various items that we submitted and going through that and providing us with their thoughts so that we could review those adequately. So thank you all very much. I'll continue when you're ready, ma'am.
I'm ready.
So as mentioned, there are only 3 items that we disagree with the staff recommendation on. One is the drive-through locations being limited to the east side of the buildings so as to allow us design flexibility into the future. The team today is going to speak about a number of items, and I'm briefly going to talk about those, and then I'll touch on the other 2 items that we have concerns with. Jennifer Sapin will touch on Lee Plan compliance and Land Development Code compliance. She'll talk about the surrounding uses and how the Bayshore area has changed east of I-75. She'll touch on the plans that probably many of y'all are aware of, and that is what FDOT is planning for Bayshore Road. Ted Treesh will talk in much more detail about that, but Jennifer will touch on that as part of her presentation. She'll also go over our master concept plans and outline the various aspects of those to show kind of what our vision is of what may happen on this particular parcel. Next, she'll talk about buffering for the project. That's to Bayshore Road, but then certainly on the north line, and we believe that a wall that has been recommended by staff is unnecessary because of the vegetation and the setbacks on the north line. So that's the second item that we disagree with staff on, and that is the necessity for, I believe it's condition 8, relative to a wall. We don't believe one's necessary because of the vegetation and the setbacks in the staff recommendation. Next, Jennifer will discuss and provide analysis of the requested deviations from the Land Development Code to address certain things such as cross-access, the buffering and things of that nature. She'll go through those in detail. And she'll also point out that even though we're not required to under the plan, we had held a community meeting and we had meetings with some of the neighbors, and we made some changes as a result of those meetings, and she'll touch on those as part of her presentation. Next, we'll have Mr. Nelson Taylor present an analysis of the general interchange area. He's a market research expert. He'll talk about what should occur in that area, what has occurred, and the pressures that are there. First off, there's been a number of developments that Mr. Taylor will talk about that have converted the general interchange use from the possibility for being used as commercial and retail to residential. He'll touch on those. For the remaining lands, there's a significant amount of wetlands on site on those parcels, which further decreases the ability to use that acreage to meet the needs. And then he'll talk about the net remaining acres that are available to meet the needs of the traveling public and the community, and how limited that really is when you take into consideration all those other things. And it's for that reason that we have requested the square footage allocation of 125,000 square feet for our particular project. It's based on market research. It's based on the fact that we want to make sure we can put things there that can serve the traveling public and serve the community as well. So that's the third item that we have a disagreement with staff on. There's really just three: the drive-through location, the necessity for a wall on the north portion of the property, and the square footage. Other than that, we support the staff recommendation. Next, we'll have Mr. Barrett Stayskill talk about his analysis of the property, the protected species, the land cover that's there. The only species that were noted on site, by the way, were gopher tortoises. Nothing else was found. And then he'll talk about the land cover and the density of the vegetation in the north that supports why we don't believe that a wall will accomplish anything and is not necessary. Next, Kurt Martin will discuss welfare-related issues. There's a Lee County potable water well southwest of our particular parcel, and we're within the well-filled designated areas. He'll discuss how those protection zones were created and what they really mean. He'll outline that the staff proposed conditions, specifically condition 7, which is very extensive, and the review process that will be undertaken by staff in connection with possible development of the site will address any concerns related to that well that's nearby. There are certain things that are not permissible in certain areas. There are restrictions on how development will take place. There's a lot of monitoring and other safety precautions that will be built into anything that happens there, pursuant to the Welfare Protection Ordinance and the operating rules that the county uses to review these types of applications. And then he'll show where that welfare protection area is that we have concerns about. Carl Baracco will talk about utility availability, stormwater management and drainage, and those engineering-related type of issues. Ted Treesh will discuss the level of service on Bayshore Road. More importantly, he'll talk about what FDOT has underway for Bayshore Road and how substantially that area is going to change and how substantially Bayshore Road is going to change. He'll touch base on that. Neil Montgomery will discuss any legal or procedural issues that may come up if necessary. And then at the end, I'll summarize with some points of what we believe our team has pointed out, and then reserve the right to discuss and present anything to the hearing examiner or the public pursuant to comments made by staff or comments made by the public. And at this time, that concludes my initial opening remarks. I'd be happy to entertain any questions if the hearing examiner has those. All right, we'll move forward. Thank you very much.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jennifer Sapin. I am an AICP certified land planner, and I've been accepted as an expert witness in land planning and land development code. I have a resume with me, but I do believe that was given to you with the 48-hour letter. So the subject site is located off an interchange in I-75 in the northeast corner generally of I-75 and Bayshore Road. Slightly more to the east at the northeast corner of Wells Road and Bayshore Road. It's an 8.75 acre property and it's currently zoned CPD. So it is currently commercially zoned and it was approved in 2006 through Z06046. Our request today is to allow 125,000 square foot of commercial uses on the property. Before we get into much about the project, I want to dive in right away in the Bayshore Community Plan. The very first policy in the Bayshore Community Plan outlines this specific area within the community plan. So it's on the far end of the Bayshore community, and it specifically talks about where retail development will occur within the Bayshore community. The first area listed is at the interchange of I-75 and Bayshore Road, so this is subject property and land within the general interchange future land use category, which this property resides within. Looking at the future land use map, as I said, the property is within the general interchange future land use. When we look at that policy 1.3.2, you see two general uses that are expected there. The first one is for the traveling public. So this is majority for I-75, but also the arterial road of Bayshore Road, which intersects with I-75. Policy 1.3.2 submits that there will be expected a broad range of uses due to the location and the market attractions. I also want to point out that due to its future land use category, it is defined as a future urban area by the comprehensive plan with that definition provided here of general interchange. Looking back in time, in 1989, you can see that the general interchange policy was established back then at 1.3.2, and it is unchanged today. The orange text in this slide is text which is a duplicate of what existed in 1989. And the maps on the right, you can see, it's kind of hard to see, the upper map is all of Lee County with the cover sheet, and under the video there shows the subject site. The PowerPoint presentation you have, there's a little yellow orange circle there, and that shows that the subject site was in the general interchange in 1989 with the exact same uses historically as what is allowed today. Stepping back and looking at the I-75 corridor, I'm looking here between the Punta Gorda Airport and Southwest Regional Airport. The thing that stands out is a 17.5-mile stretch of road where there are no gas stations. Looking south of the river and south of the subject site, there's several gas stations at every interchange of I-75 for 21 total gas stations in 5 exits. And then going north at Punta Gorda on Jones Loop, there's 5 gas stations at Jones Loop Road. Today there are only the 2 gas stations at Bayshore Road, Love's on the west side and Lawhon's on the east side. So I do want to point out, because I have somewhat of a personal story with this, you know, I-75 serves as a major hurricane evacuation corridor. But for residents of Lee County who want to use Punta Gorda Airport to leave, there are very few gas stations near the airport. I know after Irma, I was trying to get my daughter out of the area, and I had a really hard time leaving North Cape Coral, finding a gas station. So the traveling public would be served by another gas station at this location. Looking at the traveling public along Bayshore Road now, an arterial road, The land within the existing general interchange, future land use, is very limited only at the interchange area. It's shown in kind of a salmon pink color here. Looking at that area, I've grouped them in 3 black polylines and then the subject site. South of Bayshore Road, there's a creek that bisects that, as well as north of Bayshore Road. So there are a lot of wetlands and the creek. So a lot of that property within general interchange is not expected to be developed as commercial and serving this commercial need for the public and the residents of Bayshore community. There are residentially zoned properties north of the subject site, currently developed as residential within the general interchange, so you would not expect commercial development to occur anytime soon in those locations. Looking at the future land use going east on Bayshore Road, north of Bayshore Road is predominantly rural. South of Bayshore Road is sub-outlying suburban. So you would not expect a lot of commercial development along Bayshore Road, making this property even more unique and more of a need to provide that commercial service. The area around Bayshore and Bayshore community has changed a great deal with approval of residential units and some very large properties. You see them here shown red. Of course, the largest is Babcock Ranch on State Road 31, shown on the far east side of the slide, with Owl Creek, the Greenwell, MPD, and Bayshore Ranch, Stonehill Manor, and then there are some developments on the west side of I-75. North of the site is Brightwater and Lee Tana. And when you look at the units where are proposed here, Brightwater, you'll see we've got 1,275 units. That is at development order anticipated. The zoning was actually approved for 1,500. So there are a great number of rooftops that are being built right now and expected to come within the next 5 years. So this commercial development will provide localized commercial for all of those new rooftops coming in, as well as existing residents, and provide that commercial service for the traveling public on Bayshore Road. What I also really want to point out is how Bayshore Road connects all of these projects. You can see that Bayshore Road feeds these projects from the west, Babcock, Owl Creek, Bayshore Ranch. All of those will feed to the interstate and go by this subject property. Looking a little closer at the future land use map, again, it's the 2 uses you would expect to see by policy 1.3.2. And this looks a little closer at this land that is available within the general interchange. So all of the pink area east of I-75 is a total of 97 acres here. Excluding the subject site, we're wanting to look at what other commercial potential is available beyond this project. 11 acres are developed as residential. We've got some public roadway in there. The wetlands and creek, which we wouldn't expect to be commercially developed. And then there's 15 acres that have access north on Triplet Road. So you would have to go down 2 local roads to get to that property. So I wouldn't expect commercial development to go in there either. So this leaves us with only 16 acres of commercial development beyond the subject site to serve, again, all of these residents coming and going from work. Looking at the zoning map, we do have several different types of zoning categories around the property. AG2 is northwest and to the northeast. East side of our property, we have a commercial plan development approved. And then the AG2 property that's noted on this map here, there is a CG zoning that is currently under review. There is another CG zone property just a couple of parcels down at the intersection of Bayshore Road and Knoll Road. That's Lawhon's gas station, pretty well known, but both of those properties would be CG. Looking at the surrounding area, that's the bottom right side of the slide is cut off, but this is the Bay Point Yacht and Racket Club. This is an older project, so what we're looking at is the rural nature of this area. So it is kind of been a hodgepodge of development. There are some rural areas for sure, but there have been established developments that are not rural in nature. This development's right on the river. You see where the location with the yellow star on the map. And this is a 3 to 5 story multifamily building. It was constructed prior to 98, I believe in 83, but the Lee County aerials only go back to 98, and it was constructed at that time. Brightwater, which is north of the project on Pritchett Road. You see here it's 1,275 units anticipated by development order, 1,500 approved by zoning. Their bubble plan, color plan is on the right. On the left, you can see where the lots have been platted in the southwest corner, some of those smaller 40-foot type of single-family lots. So this is not a rural development. It has changed the nature of this community, and this project, Brightwater, is definitely not in rural in nature. Two other projects on Bayshore Road. On the north side of Bayshore Road, Bayshore Ranch, it is 110 acres, 130 units were approved on that. That exceeds the rural future land use, which therefore makes it not rural. The reason that it was able to exceed the future land use density of rural is due to its location on an arterial road and being within the utility service area. So there was a policy enacted that would allow that development to exceed the 1 unit per acre required by rural. Stonehill Manor on the south side of Bayshore Road, it's 71 units on 40 acres. This is over the rural density, but you would expect that within the sub-outlying suburban future land use. So again, neither of these developments are within the rural densities. Looking in some of the uses in the surrounding area, of course, this is the neighboring commercial use at Lawhons. They have a grocery, convenience, self-service pumps. The reason I bring this up, which I'll go through some more details on this in another slide, but the Land Development Code now has features for certain types of uses, certain types of lightings and buffering. So this type of development that you see here, this occurred before those protections were in place. So future gas stations built on the subject site, you would not expect to look the same as this gas station. For example, I want you to keep your eye on the mechanical equipment above and behind the building, the buffering around the use, the building and the parking, the access to the site, the lack of a single channelized access to get into the property, the canopy, the fuel canopy, the coloring, yes, and the loading areas in the back of the project. As Ron mentioned, the Bayshore Road is going through review with FDOT. The plans shown here are of Bayshore Road on the upper right is one of 2 options that they're proposing. You'll see it's a very large area used for this intersection. That again is important because that eats into some of that developable acreage within the general interchange future land use. You can see there's a roundabout on Bayshore Road proposed. And the cross sections, I show one here at the bridge, another just the standard cross section. But you can see these are urban sections. They're not rural. There's closed drainage with curb and gutter systems. So the arterial road cutting through this community is no longer rural, will no longer be rural.
Okay, can we go back to that slide? Explain to me what this diagram is showing.
Ted Treesh will talk a little bit more about this. What I wanted to touch on here is the aesthetics, the feel of this, and also the land that is used within the general interchange. But the aesthetics and look and feel of it is an urban cross section. The roundabout in the bottom left, that is not near the subject site. That is east of the subject site. It's just to show the feel of what this road will be once it is developed.
So the diagram on the upper right is what the area is going to look like in contrast to the diagram on the lower left. Is that what you're trying to show?
No. The diagram on the upper right is near the interchange. The diagram up in the lower left is further down Bayshore Road. It's just to show what the stretch of Bayshore Road is going to look like from I-75 to State Road 31. The only time in these graphics, the only area where the subject site is shown is in the upper right, and you can see they have a couple of alignments that they're looking at that has not been locked in yet, exactly what that will be. But either alignment, you'll see there's multiple lanes, multiple lefts, ins, out, with closed drainage and a very large urban
So
road.
where's the property on the diagram in the upper right? And the inset?
Here?
No, the little inset?
So here, this is Wells Road in both of these
So
subject sites.
the larger depiction is one option and the smaller depiction is a zoom in?
It's another option, because you can see, it's another alternative. You see that it's slightly different here and here.
Okay, and is it your testimony that both these things are under consideration by FDOT at this time?
They are. Ted can speak a lot more with FDOT. He's had conversations with them. My point is that this is not a rural road, and it'll change the dynamics of the community. The site does have water and sewer available to it, and the site is on a major arterial right next to I-75, so it is compliant with policy 2.2.1 and standards 4.1.1 and 1.2. This is the approved master concept plan. It did allow a mix of residential uses. It divided the site between area A and B.
Okay, hang on.
Yes.
It allows a mix of commercial uses.
Correct.
You said residential.
Yeah, you said residential.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, definitely commercial uses. Sorry, CPD, yes,
Thank you.
definitely commercial uses. So it's split into two areas, Area A along Bayshore Road and Area B north and abutting the preserve and adjacent single-family property. The uses within Area A are more intense types of uses, similar to the proposal that we have today. There are two access points on Wells Road, and you can see the northernmost one is dimensioned to 200 feet from the existing single-family driveway to the north. And there is an access point on Bayshore Road. We are proposing two master concept plans. They're very similar in the exterior features, but interior to the design is slightly different. Both have only one access on Wells Road. Both have a natural preserve buffer on the north boundary, same size, the same width. And by land development code, lighting, trash will be in accordance with those required criteria. Looking at master concept plan A, this is anticipated to be a multi-use tenant with two or more out parcels along Bayshore Road, and then a third or fourth anchor in the back. This may or may not be platted. The bottom left of this master concept plan shows how it could be platted with a right-of-way and lot lines, or it may just be developed as a single owner. The lot size and building placements, specifically, of course, that is regulated by the property development regulations. But some uses have unique setbacks, buffers, or other conditions, which I'll get into. And master concept plan B, again, all the access and preserves are the same, but this is contemplating a single use tenant where it would not be multiple property owners or developments. Access to the property, there is one access on Wells Road. We have shifted that quite a bit to the south. Previous master concept plan had it only 200 feet from the residential driveway. We've over doubled that to 415 feet. It provides internal connectivity between the different parcels. And there is an eastern connection, and we do agree with staff. They have a condition for deviation 2 that relates to the eastern access, which I will get into. And the Bayshore access is unchanged. Oh, and you'll know on this master concept plan, you can see here where the 400-foot setback line is. I will get into that, but there are certain uses that are restricted to only that 400-foot setback.
Where's the 400-foot setback?
So basically, the 400-foot setback goes a little bit north of the access road onto Wells Road. So basically everything from Wells Road access south would allow these uses that have other restrictions on them. So when we spoke about, we were looking at the photos of Lawhons, it did not use the land development code criteria and during its development that new projects would be required to adhere to. So currently, and we have not asked for any deviations from this criteria, so this is what the residents would expect in this area, that loading docks, outdoor storage, trash collection, and heating and air, and mechanical equipment, all of those would be fully shielded from adjacent properties and street right-of-ways when viewed from ground view. The shielding material design for these equipment areas must be consistent with design and treatment of the primary facade of the commercial development and the landscape area, and the rooftop mechanical equipment must be shielded. Regarding lighting, it may not exceed 0.5 foot candle at the property line or 0.2 10 feet from the property line. And fixtures used to accent architectural features must be aimed and shielded so that light is directed only onto those features and not onto off-site property. And non-essential exterior commercial lighting must be turned off after business hours.
And these are code requirements.
Correct, correct. Looking at the buffers for the project, these are buffers for just most standard uses. Some uses have additional buffers. The north buffer, the proposed buffer is an indigenous buffer, 75 feet wide. Between the north property line and the indigenous buffer is an 8-foot LCEC easement. Because it is within an easement, we are not able to claim any indigenous credits for that. However, the applicant has no intentions on clearing that 8-foot strip of land. And within that buffer area, we do have an indigenous management plan that is included with the application, and we are committing to providing supplement plantings should any of that vegetation become sparse once exotic materials are cleared out of there. However, I do want to point out when in the graphic up here, you can see that it is 411E1 and 420E2. So both of those flux codes are expected to have lower exotic infestation. Type A buffer, which would be on the east border, so that would be abutting the existing CPD and the AG property that is going through the CG rezone. That buffer would be 5 feet wide with 4 trees. And the buffer along Wells Road and Bayshore Road would be 15 feet wide with 5 trees and a double staggered row. However, there are certain uses that have additional buffers and additional setback criteria. Land Development Code 34-1353 requires special criteria for convenience food and beverage store, automotive service stations, fast food restaurants, and car washes. If you propose any of these uses, the buffers increase to 25 feet wide for both Wells Road and Bayshore Road, and there will be a 15-foot buffer within the internal access way. The buffer trees are also increased in number of trees and size, increased to 5 trees per 100 linear feet, and a 14 feet height installed with a 6-foot that should be spread. And palms may be used, but at a trade-off. 3 palms equals 1 tree. And this is land development code. This is just to let the folks here know what type of buffers you would expect to see. However, the entire buffer can't be all palm trees. Only half of that can be palm trees. The shrubs for these particular uses would be 24 inches installed and maintained at 36 inches at 1 year after planting and planted 3 feet on center.
Traffic lights?
The canopies, so the fuel canopy going over the gas station, the lighting would be required by land development code, so recessed, indirect, and prohibits top-mounted lighting. And the color must be consistent with the principal structure. The graphic on the bottom here, it's hard to see, but what I wanted to point out is that when you're thinking about these types of uses, specifically to the residential property that abuts to the north, this would not be the only buffer, not just the 25-foot buffer. You have the indigenous buffer, you have the use of whatever would be in that northern parcel, and then you would have a 15-foot buffer along the access easement, and then the use. So there are duplicate buffers, and the use that would be in between a convenience store or a car wash and that residential to the north, that use in between would have parking lot trees, building perimeter plantings. So there's a great deal of plantings that would be between the residential property to the north and any of these four uses, so more than the buffering that is shown here. We have put special conditions on certain uses. The applicant and staff are in agreement with that. We have a list here of uses that are restricted to only the southern 400 feet of the property. So again, these uses are essentially south of that access road off of Wells. And these include some of the uses that have those special buffers: car washes, fast food, convenience stores. There are also some uses which require a special exception. So there are four uses listed here: bar, cocktail lounge. These would require special exception, so that means another public hearing. So again, the residents would have an opportunity to speak on if any of those uses were proposed. Looking at the comprehensive plan, policies objective 5.1, policy 5.1.1, and 6.1.4. These are the policies that look into protection of existing and abutting residential, the character of the existing residential community. So the previous slides, I walked through the three bullets on the left, how we have increased setbacks and buffers for certain uses to ensure protection of the residential abutting to the north. We have an indigenous preserve buffer and a preserve management plan to protect that residential use to the north and other residential uses beyond that to the north. And the land development code provides commercial design criteria and lighting criteria that's standard in the county to protect abutting properties from off-site light spillage. Next, I want to go into how the uses are consistent with the area. First, many of the uses that we're proposing are already approved in this CPD. Many of the uses are allowed in CG zoning, which again is allowed a couple properties down and is proposed in the abutting property. And
So the property in between this site and the already zoned CG site is a pending zoning case for CG? Is that what you're saying?
correct. Well, so starting at Knoll, you have Lawhons, which is a CG zoned property. And then heading west, pink here, that is a CPD, W&W Service Park CPD. There is another CPD. And then in the light yellow, that is what is AG2 with CG zoning pending.
And what about that piece in between those and the road?
That is Bayshore right-of-way.
Oh, it is. Okay, thank you.
All right, so
So the business on the corner is in the Bayshore right-of-way?
that right-of-way has not been expanded in that area.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at the uses that are allowed in the neighboring CPDs, so that would be the properties colored blue, purple, pink, and orange. Looking at some of those uses, they're very similar to what we are proposing. They have convenience food and beverage store, drive-through facility for any permitted use, repair shop, self-service fuel pumps with no restriction on the number of fuel pumps, vehicle and equipment dealers, processing and warehousing, restaurants, building material sales, and transient hotel motel. So many of the uses that we are proposing exist as allowed uses in the area today. This is a broad, large list. I just wanted to show, just kind of quickly show, there is a large number of uses that we are proposing today that are already approved in the current CPD. And then these CG properties, looking at the uses within that general zoning district, these are some of the uses that are allowed in that zoning district. And all of these uses are allowed, so they would be allowed in the property pending to our east and allowed on the Law Homes property, but none of these uses are being proposed by the subject property. So some of these are considered more intense and would be allowed on those properties, but are not proposed in this property. I want to point out vehicle and equipment dealers. I have a typo on here. It says 4. It's actually supposed to be 5. We have eliminated 5. And vehicle equipment dealer 5, those are large trucks, bulldozers, construction equipment. It's hauling equipment. So we're not proposing those, but those would be allowed in other commercial properties in the area. Public input, we did have a community meeting on October 26th of 22. It was at the New Hope Church, which is right near the site on the south side of Bayshore Road. Now, this is not required by the Land Development Code for the Bayshore community, so this was a voluntary meeting. It was pretty well attended, so I think the word got out pretty good about the meeting. We also met with the residential property owners who are directly to the north. After meeting with both of those groups, we made the changes that are on this slide. We submitted the application, met with both of these groups, then made revisions, and then resubmitted. So one of the things we changed was the buffer on the north line. We increased it by a couple tenths of an, well, it's over an acre now. The Wells Road entrance, we did have it further to the north, closer to where the previous approval had it, but we moved that to the south. Our first submittal, all of the uses that we had proposed would have been anywhere on the site. So after meeting with them and hearing some of their concerns of uses, we restricted those that they would only be on the southern 300 feet of the property. Now, since that time, we have changed that restriction from 300 feet to 400 feet, but that was due to the squeeze that the well fill zone had late into the application process. The well fill zones became apparent, so that was revised to 400 feet. So the uses of concern that we eliminated, uses that were the residents had concern with, we eliminated the animal kennel, but we did keep the veterinarian office. The bar cocktail lounge, restricted it to that southern boundary if the bar cocktail is a standalone, but if it's part of the hotel, it could be within the hotel. Nightclubs completely eliminated. Package store, it remains, but no consumption on premise as a use related to that store. Recycling facility was eliminated. Mass transit and maintenance depot was eliminated. And any consumption on premises will be restricted to that above, meaning that it would, if it's a standalone bar, it would need to be in that southern boundary. Blasting, we clarified that that is not a requested use. And we, at that time, reduced our intensity. The original application had 150,000 square foot, so we reduced that to 125,000 square foot as requested today. So next, I want well, that is in the wrong location. We might have to go back to that. This is the neighboring CPD. It abuts, if I can go up here. This is where our property abuts. I point that out because deviation 1 is only in that location to that CPD. So deviation 1 would require an excavation setback of 50 feet. We're requesting to allow only 30 feet in that area. Now, there is a buffer there, a type A buffer, 4 trees, so that will provide some separation. Both projects are providing a type A buffer. When you look at their approved master concept plan, a detention area abuts our water management lake. So the reduced excavation for our water management lake will allow just a little bit more on earthwork material to be produced on site, where you just have water management facilities abutting one another with a type A buffer. So we don't see any detriment to public safety and health and welfare by reducing that excavation setback. Deviation 2 requires parking lot interconnections. The deviation that we are requesting applies to that same CPD we were just talking about, and because of the water management facilities being next to one another, no access is really available in that location. However, we are proposing an access to the south, but that property is currently zoned AG. Because of the deviation request and the liquidity of that zoning application, staff has come up with 3 conditions of approval for deviation 2. The master concept plan has kind of simplified the language of this a little bit, so I will read from there. So the easterly connection to the abutting property at time of development order, 1, if it is zoned and developed as commercial, then you just have to provide a connection. But if it is zoned commercial but not developed, you have to stub out a parking lot. If it is not zoned commercial, so it is still AG at the time of the subject site's development order, then a 24-foot cross-access easement would be provided. So this provides the interconnection between the commercial parcels, that is the intent of this land development code, without trying to meander a connection where both properties have water management systems abutting one another. Deviations 4 and 5 apply to lot size. This is specifically for fast food restaurants and car washes only. They have a minimum lot width and a minimum lot size. The request is to reduce those. This will allow for some of the smaller models. Some of the franchises, I know I've seen car lots and fast foods that are, or car washes and fast foods that are pretty small. So this is to allow some of those uses if the parcel were to be subdivided and platted. And again, the property development regulations will dictate the placement and setback of the building on that lot. Deviation 6, the land development code would require a type C or an F buffer along the north property line. So that is when a commercial development abuts a residential property, a C or an F buffer would be required. That table is shown here. So the land development code would deem either of these buffers an appropriate buffer to provide between a commercial development and a residential development. As I described, the proposed buffer is 75 feet wide, plus an additional 8 feet LCEC easement of open space. And that open space, even if those trees are cleared in that LCEC easement, that additional open space will allow those tree canopies to expand and grow to their full potential. So understanding that both a C and an F buffer provide appropriate buffering between commercial and residential, and when you look at a C and F buffer, the difference between them is whether there is or not a wall, how many trees, and how wide they are. So if you compare those two, you can then correlate and extract from there what width and how many trees equals the presence of a wall. So additional width and additional trees provides just as much an appropriate of a buffer, C or F. So from this, you can extract that 15 additional feet onto a buffer, because you're comparing the width, 15 feet to 30 feet of a C and an F, so 15 additional feet is the equivalent of a wall. 5 extra trees is the equivalent of a wall. The proposed buffer is 75 feet wide, whereas the type F is only 30 feet. So there's 45 feet additional, the equivalent of 2 type F buffers in width, plus another half type F buffer. And then, as I mentioned, the existing vegetation is flux codes E1 and E2, which this indicates low exotic infestation. And I would also want to point out that this, shown in here in these photos, this existing buffer on the north side, using existing trees to buffer is also helpful for neighbors, because during construction, that vegetation is always already in place. As opposed to a C or an F buffer, would be newly planted vegetation. It wouldn't have the same height, it wouldn't be filled in the same, and of course wouldn't be as deep. So once the exotics are removed from this, this is on the bottom right. This is on Bayshore Road. This is a Google Earth. I dropped the guy on the right side, would be where the indigenous is, and then the top picture is I just turned that guy and looked to the right. Now, I didn't take photos of the North Buffer when I was there, but it survived the hurricane pretty well. I have been out there. And you can see the height of those trees by looking at the power lines. You can see that those trees are as tall, or if not taller, than those power lines. So the existing vegetation will provide a really good buffering between the proposed uses, and a better buffer than a brand new, newly planted buffer, especially during construction. Deviation 7, this applies to the dead end shown on this subdivision detail here. What we wanted to do is, if this is platted with a road right-of-way in there, the Land Development Code requires a vehicular turnaround at the end of the right-of-way. What we wanted to be able to do was subdivide it, but then use the parking maneuvering area within that last easterly lot to provide that vehicular turnaround, rather than providing an entirely separate cul-de-sac for that purpose. I did speak with the fire chief about this. He said, from what he sees, he has no objection to this, but he does not have enough information to be able to say whether he has an objection to this or not at this time. He needs to see where the fire hydrants are, what the radius is of the pavement. Basically, he needs to see the design of that easterly parcel. So we worked with staff, and we have agree on a condition that a letter of no objection would be required from the fire department prior to development order approval, should this cul-de-sac deviation be utilized. That concludes mine. Do you have any questions of my many slides?
You want to go first?
I don't have any questions. Okay, members of the public, your questions will occur during public input time. All the applicants' experts will be present and will respond at the conclusion of public input.
Okay, Ms. Stapin, on page 11, you went through policy 1.3.2, and you briefly touched on the fact that residential is permitted in the general interchange. I just want to ask you, what kind of residential is permitted in the general interchange?
Multifamily.
So if any of the single-family parcels are redeveloped, they couldn't be redeveloped with single-family, could they?
That's correct, yes. New single family would not be allowed in the general interchange.
And then on page 23, you were talking about the original master concept plan, and you indicated that the access was 200 feet south of the north property line?
200 feet south of the abutting residential driveway. So it is closer to the property line. You see the dimension here is that 200 feet is to the existing residential driveway.
In the proposed master concept plan, were you able to shift that access further south away from the residential?
Yeah, we have it now as a minimum of 425 feet to the residential driveway.
With the, in your expert opinion, when that access and that activity is moved another 200 feet south, does that reduce the impact on the property to the north?
It definitely reduces that impact. As vehicles turn and exit the site, lights will be much further away. And just generally leaving your home, they will be able to drive down the road for a small period by the preserve before immediately entering the other master concept plan, where the access would have been right at the preserve.
And You did have a graphic where there are parcels that have significant right-of-way for Bayshore Road that aren't developed.
Yeah.
And the hearing examiner asked about the parcel known as, you've referred to as Lawhans. And it appears that there's been a taking on the east side of Null Road as well. If FDOT takes the same amount of right-of-way from the parcel you referred to as Lawhans, can that be redeveloped with some fairly intense uses based on the CG zoning?
Yes, when we, I don't know what slide it was, those CG uses, what slide it was, but they did have more intense uses than what is proposed by this project. I think I'm going the wrong way. Oh, what was there? There we go. So these are the uses that would be allowed at the redevelopment of that CG parcel, which Lawhans is in now. And of course, the most intense is the Vehicle and Equipment Dealers Group 5, which is heavy construction equipment. But many of these would have some intense uses in high traffic.
And are, in your opinion, are CG uses rural in nature?
No, they are not inherently rural in nature. You do see CG uses at nodes in rural areas, at major intersections, kind of in neighborhood, commercial. But as general, when you look at the uses of CG, no, they are not rural.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
And with that, Nelson.
I don't go before, just the arrows.
Right button.
Okay, perfect. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Nelson Taylor, the Vice President of Market Research for LSI Companies. I've previously been recognized in other venues as an expert witness regarding market analysis. I think my CV was submitted with Jennifer's 48-hour window. So I'm requesting to be recognized as an expert witness for market analysis for this venue.
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. So some of my slides might be covered up here by the video, so I do apologize for that. The current 2022 population for Lee County has about just under 800,000 people, with the current 2022 population for the Bayshore planning community at about 5,566. Lee County Community Development relies upon the 2045 forecast from the Business of Economic and Bureau research from the University of Florida for their 2045 population estimates, which Lee County is projected to have about 1,056,600 by 2045, with an allocation of 8,653 towards the Bayshore planning community. The reason I point this out is because the recent report released from the UFBEBR forecasts Lee County as an additional 21,800 for that same time period. So it just highlights the difficulty in establishing what the 2045 population is going to look like for this area. So what I wanted to show is, it's kind of covered up here, but there's 4 approved communities that are under development: Lee Tana, Brightwater, Stonehill, and Bayshore Ranch. Stonehill Manor and Bayshore Ranch both being developed by Lennar. D.R. Horton and Lennar both doing Brightwater. Lee Tana is being shopped by a home builder now. So by
What about Litana?
It's being shopped by a home builder right now, so it's heading towards future contract potential for development. So by 2045, it would be expected that all 4 of these would be completely built out. So if you take the 1,677 units times the average household size of 2.5, indicates an additional population by 2045 of 41,093. If you take the 2022 population, you can see adding those 2 up is over and above by about 1,100 future residents over what is projected by 2045 from Lee County Community Development. And this doesn't anticipate any other vacant parcel within the planning community to be developed. So it just kind of shows how much growth is expected to come here over the next 21 years. This slide here shows the potential commercial locations within the Bayshore planning community of about 122 acres. However, per the Bayshore community plan, retail commercial activity shall be limited to the general interchange future land use only. So with that, this is where retail is limited to per the Bayshore community plan. So as you can see, these parcels are under fragmented and segmented ownership, which doesn't allow unification currently for large-scale retail development. So if you take the overall acreage here of 81.71, which is what is the general interchange, which is the only area retail is allowed to be developed within the Bayshore community plan, less what is already residentially improved, which is in the blue over here, of 11.21 acres, and then the large bright yellow is what is considered the wetlands from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wetland inventory. So you can see how much wetlands are scattered through the general interchange future land use, which leaves about 41.9 acres of net developable land. And what you can't see there is the Seminole RV Park, which is just to the north. 2 weeks ago, they applied for a rezoning for 29 acres within the general interchange here for projected 287 RV pads. So that will further reduce what is going to be allocated and allowed for retail development within this location. So currently in the Bayshore planning community, there's only about 39,000 square feet of retail floor area. In Lee County, there's about 48.9 million. This is all coming from the CoStar Real Estate Analytics, a leader in real estate analytics for the country. So based on the current population, you can see Bayshore has about 7 feet of retail space per resident, where Lee County has about 61.8. So if you take the future forecasted population by 2045 of 9,750 residents times 60 square feet, it would indicate about 585,000 square feet of retail floor area would be needed to accommodate not only the residents of the community, but as well as the traveling public. So back to the previous slide, if you only have 41.9 net developable acres, which doesn't account for the 2 weeks ago application, which is going to further reduce this land area, each acre would have to be developed with about almost 14,000 square feet of commercial floor area to accommodate the future needs of this community. So if you have 8.75 acres for the Bayshore Village site, times that 13,962, we come out to our 122,167 square feet, approximately 125,000 square feet as our request is. So in summary, the Bayshore community is growing as evidenced by the residential planned communities. The recent report from the Lee County Economic Overview highlights the need for commercial activity surrounding the Bayshore planning community. The allocated commercial land is fragmented by residential and wetlands within the general interchange, leaving few parcels capable of supporting future retail needs. The site will meet the needs of the traveling public to and from Babcock Ranch along I-75, as well as the forecasted population increase within the Bayshore planning community. And with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I
I
don't
have
have
one
questions
question.
at this time.
I believe the total number of units in Babcock Ranch is 19,000 plus.
Correct.
Do you have any idea how many units are being, I keep hearing it's one of the fastest growing communities, along with Ave Maria. So what's the absorption rate? What are we seeing in terms of number of new houses per year?
Currently, there's about 3,000 total residential units built. They hit for 2023, I believe they're on pace to eclipse 800 residential units total permitted. Just last month in November, there was 178 new homes permitted. Their forecast is that they will be able to sell 1,200 units and become the top master plan community in all of Florida in the next couple of years. So they have opened up development to all the national home builders, so that area is only going to become more developed in the next 5 years with up to 6,000 new residential units.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take a 10-minute break after Mr. Stay-School's testimony.
Do you want me to ask you?
Morning, Madam. Barrett State School, Bear Paws Environmental. I've previously been tendered as an expert witness in wetland and wildlife ecology, and I'd like to proceed.
Please proceed.
I'll be brief. There's The project contains all uplands. There's no wetlands. As Ms. Sapin said, there were some gopher tortoise observed on the adjacent property. There were no protected species or burrows identified on the subject site itself. As Jen also discussed earlier, with regards to the buffer up north, it is pretty forested in there. It's a upland pine flatwoods as well as a mixed upland forest. Very limited exotics, quite dense canopy in oaks / pine, thick subcanopy with a native ground cover dominated by saw palmetto. That's really all I have to say environmentally with the project.
Okay, clarification
Yes, ma'am.
on the tortoises.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't observe any tortoises on the site? You
They were
observed
observed on the adjacent property to the east, but none were observed on the site itself.
no burrows, no nothing?
No burrows, no cavities, no stick nests, no trees, nothing like that on the subject parcel itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I'm going to take a 10-minute break now, and then we will resume with Kirk Martin.
They pointed out.
Oh, no, I dressed up.
Okay,
It is cold. I'm always cold.
Yeah, no, Bluetooth's not an issue. I just remembered it twice. Let me just look at my file real quick. Just a typo. Let's see.
Yes, ma'am.
List both group 1 and 2 in separate areas that shouldn't do that. Group 1 and 2 is going to be good.
Well, I guess if it says it's allowed,
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that it's excluded by
she'll pick up on that and she'll make sure.
Okay, but I'll clean it up because I said. Just because it says it doesn't say it's not to.
I should do it right away.
I don't even think they know that. No, I'm just a candidate now.
What I thought maybe is also say something else.
Dragging it out. Take it from the water, give it to the river, and that's later. Yeah, that one just sounds too right. And then yeah, that was great. I used up all my time until I only had one button and I had to push it. It's like you have to complete it.
It does sound like things have moved. But that means that we need to restructure the vision. This hearing is too both. But we'll see.
You're still in the applicant. I'm sorry? You're still in the applicant? I believe so. Yeah, yes.
Oh,
Question for you. Do you know what order they do the public input? And I just have some other things. Okay, so from last to first or from first to last?
I think what happens is she's going to pick it up, and the first person who sort of is going to be one of the first to speak.
I'm just trying to figure out the names. So I'm going to run through it. Benjamin Hoffman. Yeah, well, we worked together. I worked as a civil engineer with Haley Word projects with you. So I'm just here on the public side because I I was here very early. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can I was just curious what the process was. Yeah, I don't think we need to do anything extra. Yeah. I just wanted to know what the process was. So, thank you very much. Oh, okay. So you live
Oh, so all your tights came away yesterday.
White tights yesterday.
For snow. Look out. Oh yeah, okay. It's terrible.
They have out of town milk. I have one of
Didn't get to the part traffic light.
I have no idea. I'm just a court reporter. I have no idea what's coming. They'd be the people to ask. They would be the people to ask.
Sir.
She doesn't know either.
Sir.
She would.
What was your question?
Traffic mitigation, like long-term, just like, look, you can't get in and out.
Yeah, let me answer that. They're going to talk extensively about traffic, but they're going to do it in the order that they have in their presentation. I think it's not too far after this wellfield protection portion of their presentation. So transportation is going to be an element of their presentation. So it's going to be in here, and I think it's going to follow soon. But I can't control which order that they go.
Wow. Find out. You have questions. Write questions. Right.
She said them to her, right?
Yeah, Maria's always searching for them after the hearing.
Here. Well, there's way too many papers over there. We'll take it. We'll steal it.
Hey, Maria, question. There's a gentleman here, his name's Benjamin Hoffman, I think. He's with Correa's, I forgot what Correa works with, but he's an engineer, he's in the public. He came in here relatively first and put his public participation form in here so he could speak first because it was a conflict. But he just doesn't know which order, like she flips him and picks him up, so Benjamin would be his name. If he could be called one of the first, that'd be appreciated. I think you see Benjamin. Yeah, if he's on top, that'd be great.
Okay, we're getting ready to begin. If everybody can take their seats, please. We're getting ready to begin. If everybody can take their seats, please. Thank you.
Okay, we're back on the record. We'll begin with Kirk Martin.
Madam Hearing Examiner, if we could, Ms. Sapin has something she needs to correct or adjust, if we could.
Okay.
Hi there. So if you look at slide 35 of my presentation. Oh, thank you. Business Services, Group 2. That is a use that is proposed with this CPD. And with that, the staff report, page 2 of 13, has business services listed twice. So the instance where it lists both 1 and 2 is the correct one. Where it lists only Group 1, that can be stricken through.
Okay. Well, we can have you submit something before the close of the record that's correct.
With that, Mr. Martin is the next witness.
Mr. Martin, were you here when I administered the oath?
I was not.
Okay. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you give today will be the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So thank you for this opportunity. I have been tendered and accepted as an expert in this forum and others in the past, and would offer that as well.
Please proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Martin, if you would, just for the benefit of folks who may not know what you do, can you just give us a little bit for the record?
Yeah, I'm a groundwater hydrologist. I'm a geologist by training, and but I've worked in water resources over the last 40 years for municipal, private development, agricultural, mining, and so forth. So generally my expertise is in groundwater movement with related subjects. So I'm going to talk about the wellhead protection, which is a zonation that Lee County has in their ordinance for protecting public supply well fields. I'm going to talk about the origin of the concept, the mechanics of the Lee County wellhead protection ordinance, and then what this project has done to make sure that we're not going to be out of compliance with that ordinance. Just an overview. The map on the right is just a generalized map of the wellhead protection ordinance zones in Lee County. There are 4 of them. You can see there's a number of well fields, 8 or 10 or more well fields in Lee County. All these have different aquifers, so there's different zonations, different modeling approaches that took place to create these zones. But in general, the purpose of a wellhead protection ordinance is to protect a public supply, water supply well field from potential groundwater contamination. The concept for wellhead protection was developed in the 1980s to address a number of contaminated public water supply well fields that were around the country, mostly and predominantly shallow aquifers. And that's where groundwater contamination typically occurs, is in the shallow aquifer. It rarely gets into deeper aquifers, and that's something that will be important as I talk further. In Lee County in particular, the zones are based on what's called model-derived estimates of groundwater movements. And whereas they create a groundwater model for the different aquifers that are beneath Lee County, and they run it backwards. They basically pump water into the ground and see how far that travel time occurs, and they establish zones for 6 months, 1 year, 5 year, and 10 years of travel.
Slow down, please.
Yes, ma'am. That's a general comment. Okay, sorry. And I want to make sure and get across, this will be important later on as well, that the wellhead protection zones are based on models of shallow aquifers and applied to the deep aquifer, and the deep aquifer is the one that's being used at this well field. The purpose of wellhead protection ordinance is not to stop land use changes, but to manage the potential for impacts and, more importantly, to provide time to address impacts should they occur. That's really the purpose of the travel times, to make sure we have time to address anything that could occur. The Lee County Wellfield Protection Ordinance establishes groundwater times for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years, corresponding to zones 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Wellhead Protection Ordinance. In Zone 1, the 6-month travel time, there's strict prohibitions on certain land uses, mainly waste disposal and storage of large volumes of potentially contaminating substances. In Zone 2, the 1-year travel time, there's also not prohibitions, but there's restrictions, but administrative exemptions are provided within the Zone 2 travel time, or 1-year travel time, Zone 2. And then for Zones 3 and 4, there's operating permits. Again, it's just a registration of any potential contaminants you may have on your site. It's not a prohibition, it's not a restriction, it's just a certification and registration that you have these chemicals on your site. I'm going to talk about the hydrogeology underlying this area. There's a lot on this slide, but mainly just look at the green and blue coloration. The green are confining beds. These are mostly clays. Water does not travel through clays. The blues are aquifers, and there's 4 of them that we're going to talk about: the water table, the sandstone, the mid-Hawthorne, and the lower Hawthorne. The lower Hawthorne is the aquifer that's being tapped by the Lee County well field at this location. That's why it's important to realize how deep this aquifer is. The water table is at the top, is essentially what you find when you dig a hole in your backyard and there's water in it. That's the water table aquifer. The sandstone and the mid-Hawthorne are what's called intermediate aquifers. They're confined. They're separated from all the other aquifers by clay confinement. And as you can see, in between the lower Hawthorne and the water table is probably something on the order of 300 or 400 feet of clay confinement, in addition to these intermediate aquifers. In the middle there, sort of the right hand of the left-hand graph, I've got some colored bars. And the purpose there is to show what the natural water levels are in those aquifers. And you can see in the water table, I've colored it essentially to land surface. So as I said, you dig a hole in your backyard, there's water, that's the water table aquifer. And the water table surface in the aquifer is typically very near land surface, anywhere from 0 to 5 feet below land surface. In the sandstone, which would be the second bar over, the water level is typically 10 to 30 feet below land surface. And same thing with the mid-Hawthorne, it's 10 to 30 feet below land surface. The reason I bring this up is because I want you to look particularly at the lower Hawthorne. I've got it drawn above land surface because the natural water level in that aquifer is 20 to 30 feet above land surface. The point of this is to point out that water doesn't flow downhill, or doesn't flow uphill, I should say. You know, you can't get water table, or you can't get contaminants in the water table to enter the lower Hawthorne, not only because of the 300 to 400 feet of clay in the intermediate aquifers, but because the water level or the head or potentiometric surface in the aquifer is 30 feet higher than in the water table. Water can't get in that aquifer. And finally, I've shown a typical drawing of a Lee County well, production well in that well field, in the North Lee well field. Just to point out, again, it's cased with 16-inch casing down to over 500 feet. That casing is grouted in place with cement grout to seal it from the land surface. But more importantly, the process of drilling starts at the top, whereby a hole is drilled. Typically, it's going to be a 32-inch hole. That's 24 inches diameter casings put in that hole, and it's cement grouted. So you've sealed it off down into that first confining bed. Again, this is the purpose of this, is to seal off the water table from any further potential movement down hole. And again, that first casing is cemented into that first clay confinement bed. Then a hole is drilled down into the top of the aquifer, the lower Hawthorne. That 16-inch casing is put in the ground, and then that's grouted in place, again, to seal it up into that confining bed as well. So the purpose here is to show that the aquifer that's being tapped by Lee County is the lower Hawthorne. Our concern is contamination in the water table. The well construction in the North Lee County well field is created in a way to protect it from any contamination. But in addition to that, we have the natural protections of the 300 to 400 feet of clay confinement, and the fact that the aquifer head is higher than the water table.
What was that last?
So, the water level, or the head in the aquifer is higher than the water table.
What does that mean?
Head is a term used to describe what's a potentiometric surface. I know that's even worse. Bear with me a second. Sorry. The reason it's called a potentiometric surface because it's the height at which water level will rise in a well if you were to case it that high. So, for example, the wells that are tapping the lower Hawthorne aquifer, if you were to open them up, they flow. Some of them flow at 1,000, 2,000 gallons per minute because of that head, that potentiometric surface of water wanting to get out of the well. If you were to raise that casing up, say 35 feet above land surface, you'd be able to see that water level at that height. But again, we don't raise our casings up 35 feet. We have them somewhere near land surface. And those aquifers flow, or they have a pressure or a head on them that's above land surface. That's what is meant by the term. Is that clearer?
And that protects it how?
The fact that you can't put water, again, you can't make water at this level go into water that's at this level.
Right, okay.
Okay. So getting into the Bayshore Village site and the specific wellhead protection areas that potentially impact it, none of the project lies within the Zone 1 or the 6-month travel time. A small area in the southern portion of the property lies within the Zone 2 or the 1-year travel time. The remainder of the project lies within the Zone 3 or the 5-year travel time zone. So this is first button, the light. I'll just walk up here. This is the 1-year travel time. All of this is the 5-year travel time. As I mentioned before, the wellhead protection zones are based on the largest travel times modeled of the 3 shallow aquifers. So when I showed you the water table, the sandstone, and the mid-Hawthorne, the model applies to those aquifers. It doesn't even include the lower Hawthorne aquifer. But whatever the largest area that's expressed in those 3 layers is how these lines were generated. So again, the wellhead protection zone is based on a model of travel times in the shallowest aquifers, but the aquifer in the wellfield that's being protected taps a lower Hawthorne aquifer 500 feet below ground with a head or a water level above land surface. So despite the fact that, in my professional opinion, the chances of any contamination getting into this well field is nil to none, there's been a number of provisions placed into this project to make sure that we are in compliance and make sure there's no potential for contamination to enter the groundwater system. Some of these include that all fuel storage will be located outside of the wellhead protection zone 2. That there'll be double containment of all fuel storage and transmission lines, and there'll be leak detection on all of any contaminant within that double containment. In addition, there'll be a groundwater monitoring program in perpetuity on the project to make sure there's anything that comes up will be found either in the leak detection system, or if it ever is escaped there, which I can't imagine it would, in the groundwater monitoring program. Groundwater monitoring program, sorry. And that's all I had, if you have questions.
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we go back to slide 61?
Which one is 61? This one, thank you.
I'm not a scientist, so I need a little help on this. I know from when we work on water management lakes and things, and you can go 20 feet or however many feet, they always talk about, but you can't go through the confining layer. So are those the confining layers that are identified on that graphic?
Yes, the ones coloring green are confining layers.
And you indicate that the well field protection ordinance and the modeling only impacts the superficial and the other 2.
The well field protection ordinance zones were created by a groundwater model that models the water table, sandstone, and mid-Hawthorne aquifers.
Okay, so when we talk about travel times, are we talking about travel times horizontally? So if something falls here, and that's how long it takes to travel horizontally?
It's a great question. So yes, the model only looks at The model assumes that any particular contaminant is entered the aquifer immediately. So it doesn't, let's say we're looking at the Mid-Hawthorne aquifer. The model doesn't take into play the fact that it has to travel through the water table, through the confinement, through the sandstone, and into the Mid-Hawthorne. It assumes that the contaminant at land surface is in that aquifer immediately. So it's a horizontal travel time only. It doesn't take into account all
So
the
it's
vertical movement.
super conservative, almost impossible.
It's extremely conservative. It's meant to be. It's obviously a protection of a public facility. But again, in this case, as I said, the potential is really nil to none, but there is an ordinance and we want to be in compliance with it, so we've done those things.
I just want to understand whether there's a real threat to water supply or not. And if I understand what you're saying, there isn't, because a contaminant saying it could be released would have to go through all those confining layers, which would be challenging, if not impossible. And that's, a vertical, but it's really measuring the horizontal from point A to point B.
If you were to actually look at the travel time to, say, the lower Hawthorne aquifer, it wouldn't be in order of years. It'd be in maybe in centuries. It's a long, long, long time. So no, I don't think there's any chance there's going to be a contaminant entering the aquifer.
Okay. And the lower Hawthorne, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The lower Hawthorne, I thought, was a more saline aquifer.
It's a brackish aquifer.
So that would suggest to me that some kind of improvement or treatment has to occur in order to drink it.
It's treated by reverse osmosis in order to desalinate it and make it suitable for drinking.
So reverse osmosis, does it take other contaminants out of the water?
Reverse osmosis is typically the technology used to take out almost anything we deal with. It's sort of the Cadillac of treatment.
Okay. And earlier you were talking about, I can't say the word, potentiometric.
Potentiometric? Yeah.
That word. What you're, in layman's term, is that really just pressure?
It's pressure.
Okay. So because there's so much upward pressure then in the lower Hawthorne, pushing this way, contaminant, even if it could get there, would be pushed up and out?
Yes, and maybe a way to illustrate some of the impacts of this confinement zones, in which you can't have a pressurized aquifer unless it's sealed. Those clays seal it really well.
Okay.
So yes, as I said, you can't push water in, against that pressure. But more importantly, you probably can't get through the clay because that's what's holding that pressure in place anyway.
Okay, so due to the vertical distance, the pressure, the clay layer, it's a theoretical problem, not a real problem in terms of impacting water supply. Is that true?
I would say that's true, and I'll add one more to that. And the contaminant we're really talking about here is fuel. Fuel is a floating substance. It typically doesn't go down into the water. So it just tends to stay on top. So not only can you not get water table water into the lower Hawthorne, you can't get the stuff at the surface into the water table very well. So again, nil to none in my professional opinion.
Okay, so we're going to comply with the ordinance, but there's not a real threat.
I don't think there's a real threat here at all.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. The groundwater monitoring requirements. What groundwater is going to be monitored?
It's probably just the water table aquifer, because that's where the contamination would occur. Now, keep in mind that if you're going to like where the lower Hawthorne is, the county, they test that water regularly anyway as part of their treatment.
But for the purposes of the conditions of approval on this project, the groundwater monitoring is going to test the water table.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then if a substance is detected, then remediation protocol then gets activated?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I'm Carl Baracco. I'm a professional engineer with Baracco & Associates. My resume is on file. I have been accepted as a civil engineer in the past in this venue. With that, may I proceed?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, this morning I'm going to talk about utilities and drainage. But before I do that, I have to apologize. In preparing last night, I found some typographical errors. I'll point those out as I go through the 2 slides. First, with regard to utilities, potable water will be provided by Lee County Utilities. Letter of availability is on file. Sanitary sewer will be provided by Florida Government Utility Authority, and I want to point out that Gulf is in error. That's one of the typographical errors, and that letter of availability is also on file. Now we're looking at a quad map. The subject property is located where I'm pointing. This is Bayshore Road. This is I-75. The first thing I want to do is point out in the first bullet, Chapel Creek is west of here. Last night I realized I was looking at a different project information sheet. This project is in discharges to Potash Creek. So I want to make sure I point out that difference in the first bullet point.
Mr. Baracco, before you do that, can you just let us know what quad map is?
It's a quad sheet with geographical information provided by the government.
So the illustration is correct, the descriptor was erroneous.
Correct. The reference to Chapel Branch should be a reference to Potash Creek. And that water system is directly south of the subject property. So this project will be designed in accordance with South Florida Water Management District requirements. That includes analyzing a 5-year storm, a 25-year storm, and a 100-year storm event. It also includes preparing a nutrient loading analysis to ensure that nutrients leaving the site are no greater than those leaving the site today. In addition to the water management review, the project before construction will be reviewed for drainage by Lee County, and we will also go through a very significant review by the Florida Department of Transportation, which is required to issue a drainage permit, and that permit is based upon analysis of over 30 storms, generally 36 storm events. So the entire analysis is based upon many different storm events. The project is located in a FEMA zone AE. It's not in an X zone as I have here, it's in an AE zone. And the last change is that is a 100-year flood elevation. This area is elevation 10.0, not 7.0 as I had on the last bullet point. That concludes what I had to present. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, so the buildings when constructed will have to be elevated 1 foot above this 10-foot NAVD?
Based upon the current building code, yes, the buildings would be 1 foot above the FEMA elevation, which would be elevation 11 minimum.
All right, and that'll be accomplished either through fill or stem wall courses or?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm ready for Ted Trish.
Good morning, Ted Sharish with TR Transportation Consultants. My resumes on file have been sworn in, and I've been accepted as an expert in transportation planning related matters, and asked to be accepted this morning.
Please proceed.
We prepared the transportation analysis that's part of the application that's in your package. This aerial again just shows the location of the subject site along Bayshore Road at the interchange of I-75, at the intersection of Wells Road. Wells Road is a local road. Bayshore Road is a FDOT controlled roadway. The traffic study was done based on the 125,000 square feet of a commercial retail shopping center. The access based on the master concept plan was considered to with an access to State Route 78 as well as the access to Wells Road. We did have a pre-application meeting with FDOT, as we do with all projects that have frontage and shows proposed access to a state road. We did have that meeting early on in the process. As with any access to state road, that determination isn't made from a final standpoint until you actually apply for an access permit with FDOT. But we did have a permit meeting with FDOT early on in this process, so that they are aware of this project, and we have had discussions with them, and I'll get into that a little bit further in my presentation here in a moment. The traffic study that we completed was reviewed by staff. It was conducted pursuant to the administrative codes and the county requirements. In our analysis, we looked at a build-out year of 2028 in terms of a future build-out year. As with most zoning traffic studies, we look at a potential future build-out year. As with all traffic studies in Lee County and the requirements of the county, we looked at all the analysis is done based on peak season traffic conditions. So the traffic volumes are adjusted to peak season conditions. You've heard about improvements to State Route 78 that's being considered. Those improvements are not funded for construction yet, so those improvements are not accounted for in our analysis at this point because they're not funded in an adopted CIP. We cannot consider those capacity improvements in our analysis at that time. So all of our level service analysis is based on the current roadway capacity and the current condition of the roadways as they currently exist. In our analysis, the only segment that was shown to operate below the recommended level of service conditions was the segment of Bayshore between Pritchett Parkway and Wells Road. And going back to the aerial, that's this segment right here. West of Pritchett, Bayshore Road is a 4-lane divided roadway. As you go through the interchange and go to the west, all the way to through and even to US 41. As you go just past Pritchett, Bayshore Road tapers back down, and it's a 2-lane undivided road to where it terminates at State Route 31 out by the Civic Center. So again, the only segment that in 2028 that was shown to operate at a poor level service, and again, that is shown to operate at a poor level service prior to our project trips being added to the network, was this 2-lane segment, actually transitioning 2-lane segment between Pritchett and Wells Road. And again, that's in 2028 prior to our project trips being added to the intersection. All the other road segments are shown to be at a level service C. The 2-lane segment of Bayshore to our east and the 4-lane segment of Bayshore to our west are shown to operate at an acceptable level service, as well as Pritchett Parkway north of 78 is shown a level service C. We didn't evaluate Wells Road because Wells Road is a local road. Lee County doesn't require, nor do we have traffic data on Wells Road.
So when you were evaluating available capacity on Bayshore Road, based on its constructed features, it has, and its speed, it has a capacity, and that's a fixed number.
Correct.
So when you determine what the current peak hour traffic is on the road, where is that number derived?
Our numbers were taken from the Lee County concurrency report that they publish on a yearly basis. We use that as the base number, and then we grow that based on historical growth rates from sources that are provided by either FDOT or Lee County, and then based on that, the 2028 volumes, and then add the project traffic on top of that.
So how often is the county's concurrency manual updated?
Yearly.
All right, so when you conducted this analysis whenever you did it, the data you relied on was, at worst case, 1 year old?
Yes.
And how does the county get that data to determine what the current trips are on the road? How do they
get it from
collect
traffic-
that?
They get it from traffic counts that are conducted on the roads.
And what does that mean, a traffic count conducted on the road?
They either conduct counts, Lee County conducts counts, or they take it from data conducted by FDOT.
All right, and what counts it? Is it a person on the side of the road?
Yeah,
Is it
they
a device?
utilize, they hire consultants, or they use FDOT counts that actually conduct counts on the roads. They'll put road tubes on or utilize machine traffic counts to conduct daily traffic counts on the roads.
And that calculates trips going both directions on the road during whatever they determine peak hour to be.
Correct. Some count stations are permanent count stations, meaning they're counting traffic 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Other count stations are what we call just temporary count stations that they put out once a year, and they'll count traffic for just several days a year, and they utilize that count station.
What kind of count station is on Bayshore, do you know?
I know there's a permanent count station to the east, to the west of I-75. I believe to the east of I-75 is a temporary count station.
And who determines when the tubes get put down?
Either the state or the county.
So it's sometime during peak season.
It may be or it may not be, but again, they adjust their traffic counts to peak season data. It's all adjusted to peak season.
And how do they adjust it to peak season? Say they do it in July.
They utilize the permanent count station data that's counted by 365 days a year. Those stations are all over the county.
On the west side.
And those stations are all over the county.
And then they extrapolate.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That doesn't tell what is a dump truck.
Okay, please don't call out. You'll have an opportunity to speak during public input.
So again, just reminding the hearing examiner, Lee County, the state statutes were revised in 2011 to remove transportation concurrency. It's no longer a requirement in the Lee County land development regulations and the comprehensive plan. It's just a recommended requirement, so transportation concurrency is no longer a required portion of the comprehensive plan. So the level service is just a recommendation in terms of the roadway level service. So the recommended level service on Bayshore is a level service E. And again, the only segment that's shown below the level service E is that one short segment between Wells and Pritchett. And again, just for the audience's information, as this project proceeds, whether the zoning is adopted or not, there's still CPD zoning on the project. When this project proceeds to the development order stage, there'll have to be another traffic study done at the development order stage to evaluate the trip generation, the level of service on the road, the access points. There'll have to be permitting done with Lee County for the access to Wells, for the access onto Bayshore with FDOT. In terms of permitting, one of the points with FDOT that was made in our pre-app meeting was the cross-access with the property to the east. That was an important aspect with FDOT in terms of our connection to Bayshore Road and any access connection to Bayshore Road in our pre-app discussions with them. Going back to this diagram that was part of the FDOT PD&E process. This process has been going on for a number of years with FDOT in the State Route 78 PD&E process. This is a picture of what's called the diverging diamond interchange at Bayshore Road. Right now, the PD&E process is entering the final stages with FDOT. We've had a number of discussions with FDOT with this project because it directly impacts this property. The diverging diamond is what's under construction right now at Colonial Boulevard and I-75. If you're familiar with that, the interchange that's at University Parkway and I-75, if you're familiar with that interchange up by University Town Center. This interchange is what FDOT is proceeding with in looking at this interchange to help address the congestion at this interchange, particularly traffic coming from the west. If you've been up here in the morning, traffic coming from the west backs up quite a distance in the morning, getting on to I-75, and this will help address a lot of the congestion at that interchange. They have a number of several different options. You'll see at the Wells Road intersection, and they've got the inset, and they've looked at a couple different options, which is what the PD&E process does. They evaluate different options. They've informed us that they've selected the northern widening option, and that's what this diagram shows, which means they're going to widen Bayshore to the north as you proceed to the corridor out to 31. So they're going to widen Bayshore Road to a 4-lane divided roadway from I-75 to State Route 31 to a 4-lane divided cross section. Now that will include a total of 4 roundabouts between I-75 and State Route 31. Right now, as I indicated before, they don't have timing yet for the funding for the right-of-way acquisition and construction in their work program, but they are proceeding in our discussions recently with them in getting that worked out, because this project is being fast-tracked because of the development of Babcock. You may be aware that Babcock Ranch and the Babcock Improvement District is responsible for widening State Route 31 from Babcock Ranch to Bayshore Road as a design-build project. That project should be starting construction here very soon to a 4-lane roadway. FDOT is also proceeding with widening State Route 31, then from State Route 78 south to State Route 80 over the Caloosahatchee River. That process is, the PD&E process on that has been wrapped up. They're proceeding with that as a design-build project, and they want to do these 2 projects, the State Route 78 widening and the State Route 31 project, in conjunction, and get those 2 projects moved forward as design-build projects and get those moved forward and up front because of the Babcock Ranch project and the speed at which that project is moving to help accommodate the growth that's happening in this area. In our discussions and meetings with them, they hope to have this project funded to begin right-of-way acquisition, hopefully in fiscal year 24-25, and begin the design-build project in fiscal year 25-26. But again, right now, they don't have that funded in the work program. But again, that's what they're working towards. But again, they don't have that completely funded yet in the work program. But because of the development of Babcock Ranch and the speed at which that project is moving, the traffic volume is increasing, and I'll show you a graphic on that in a minute. This project is picking up speed, and the district is moving forward with trying to get this project moving and getting it advanced towards that design and construction phase. So if you have any questions on this, how this works or what it's going to look like, I can certainly, this just shows that as you go a little further east of our project, the project will include a traffic signal going back to the Pritchett intersection. They're going to relocate Pritchett Parkway to Wells Road. That's a given. And they're going to put a traffic signal at the Wells Road intersection. That has been determined by FDOT. Now, how Pritchett gets over to Wells Road, that's where we're still having a lot of discussions with FDOT. These 2 options show Wells Road coming down and being realigned with Pritchett Parkway, and then Pritchett Parkway being realigned as a free flow movement over to Wells Road, and then a traffic signal being constructed at Wells Road. These 2 options just have different this box inset at the top is just what they call a continuous green T option. They have the one lane on Bayshore is a free flow movement eastbound. It's kind of hard to see on this diagram, but the outside lane on Bayshore is a free flow lane on Bayshore, and the signal controls basically the inside lane, the inside eastbound lane, and the left turn lane. So the traffic light would allow traffic on Pritchett and Wells to turn onto Bayshore, the single left, with the one lane on Bayshore eastbound continuously having a green light. So that's the difference in this intersection versus down here. This is just a standard T intersection traffic light where both lanes on both eastbound lanes and westbound lanes stop at the traffic light on Bayshore Road. And this is what the PD&E process does. It looks at options, and then during the design process, they'll select which option they'll want to go with. So they haven't determined which of those two options. What we're in discussions with FDOT is how this exactly is going to look like, with Pritchett and Wells and servicing our property and our access. That's all still going to be looked at, and working out access to our property in the frontage along Wells Road. That's still in the preliminary stages. Obviously, Pritchett Parkway is the Lee County road. Wells Road is a Lee County road. So we're still working very closely with FDOT, the PD&E consultants, their engineers, and Bartow and their consultants on the design, on the PD&E team. So that process is ongoing. We've been working very closely with them, and we'll continue to work closely with them as the property owners of this site, in working with them through this process. Again, it's because we don't anticipate construction to start till, even at best case, 24, 25. We still have some time to work with them on this issue.
Consistent with the proposed site plan, because the proposed site plan is showing an access onto
it's about
Wells,
right here.
So that traffic's either going to have to turn north to get on the
Yep.
realignment. Well, that's what it'll have to do, right? Because there'll be no going south.
Right. Yep. No, we're very aware of it. That's why we've had several meetings.
And the insert option is even more problematic, it looks like.
Well, the insert just changes what happens down here.
Oh, okay.
The insert is the same up here. It doesn't change anything up here.
I see. The one is with the continuous.
Yeah,
right?
the only change in the insert is what happens down
I get it.
at the
Thank
traffic
you.
light.
So essentially, since 2011, transportation concurrency is no longer regulatory,
Right.
which means that because the segment of roadway that you described between Pritchett and Wells is in a failing condition, regardless of whether this project's traffic is put on it, it's not a bar to approving this project. It's intended as what, a planning tool?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's also a state highway, so, and again, this is why the state is going through this process. They understand that the growth in traffic is causing the need for this project right here that they are addressing.
Okay, so orient me, where am I?
This is just further to the east. This is Knoll Road. This is Lawhons. This is our site right here. This is the traffic signal at Knoll Road. This is the first roundabout as you go to the east. Again, there's 3 more roundabouts before you get to State Route 31. Again, this is just illustrating the point that Jen was making, that this is not a rural cross section. This is the cross section that they're proposing for Bayshore Road. This is an urban cross section, curb and gutter, 2 lanes in each direction, a raised concrete or median with curb and gutter, shared use path on each side of the roadway, So this will be the cross-section from I-75 out to State Route 31 on Bayshore Road with, again, with 4 roundabouts proposed.
Okay, I'm sorry, I hear somebody speaking in the audience. If you need to speak to your neighbor, do you mind stepping outside because it's very distracting to me? Thank you.
This is just kind of a summary from the PD&E report that FDOT has put together. Again, the graphic on the left, it's got a lot of numbers on it, but just a couple boxes I want to point out. The blue box on the top is the current ADT volumes, or the opening year ADT volumes.
What does ADT mean?
Average annual daily traffic, AADT. So this volume right here is Bayshore Road adjacent to our property, just east of I-75. So in 2025, that's what FDOT says, that's the opening year of the 4-lane roadway. So they project when they open the 4-lane road, there's going to be 23,000 cars a day on it.
So 10,000 more than there are today?
Correct. By 2035, there'll be 34,000 cars a day. And by 2045, there'll be 44,000 cars a day.
So what does the number on the left represent?
This?
Yeah,
Well, that's the ramp. This is the node on the ramp.
I see.
So these dots are where the volumes are. So I just want to point this dot right here. That's Bayshore Road between Wells and I-75. Is 44,000 cars a day by 2045. Just east of Wells, which is this dot, is 42,000 cars a day.
And what year is that?
That's in 2045, which is the bottom. The yellow box is in 2045.
And this assumes the 4-lane improvement is in place?
That assumes the 4-lane improvement is in place by 2045. So we're assuming it, so FDOT in their PE&E, this is the projections, to go from 23,000 cars a day to 44,000 cars a day by the year 2045.
And
So
at what point in this scenario is the road actually 4-laned?
the blue.
So in
That's
2
opening.
years,
That's opening year.
so in 2 years, the road is going to be 4-laned?
That's their projections. Yes.
Then if that's true, then why couldn't you look at it for,
Well, because they don't have it in their funding in their CIP.
they don't have the money?
Well, they haven't put it in their CIP yet.
Okay.
Again, they based on our discussions, they want to do it as a design build. Design build projects are typically different than normal CIP projects where they do right-of-way design, construction. Design builds are design and construction all in the same contract. That's how they're doing the 31 project with Babcock Ranch.
And when is that starting? Do you know?
Which one?
31.
31's 2 different jobs. North of 78 is actually being built by the Babcock Improvement District. They're the ones building that, not FDOT. 31 south of 78 is an FDOT project. And again, that's being done as a design build, not funded yet. But again, FDOT is working to move the funding up to do a design build. Because it's got the bridge, it's a new bridge that's going to be 300 feet east of the current bridge, and it's going to be a high span bridge. They're getting rid of the bascule. So it's a much more expensive project. So they're trying to find the money right now. So they're hoping to get it done. They want to have both segments done and open at the same time. But again, you know how the state works with money. So they're hoping to have it, again, started by 2025. But right now, technically, they do not have the design build project in their work program. But that could change. FDOT's work program begins July 1. That's when their fiscal year starts. So by July 1 of 24, it could be put in their work program depending upon the state budget. It could change. You never know. But again, the point here of this graphic is to show that these volumes are quite significant. This retail project is meant to serve this traveling public. This is a commercial project. This is an interchange. This is going to serve those traveling public, this 23,000 to growing traveling public that's going by this project. This is going to have a significant amount of pass-by traffic that's attracted to this project. For those convenience uses, not only the neighborhood uses, but also the traveling public that's going by this project. To reinforce some of the planning arguments that Jen brought up, that it's a commercial use, a commercial property. The uses that we're asking for are more, not only to serve the neighborhood, but also the traveling public that's driving by this site. That's all I had. I haven't answered any questions.
I do have some questions. Mr. Treese, you've used the term PD&E several times and it's on this slide. Just for the record, what is a PD&E?
Oh, man. Planning, design, and our environmental study, I believe, is the technical term.
So does it analyze all aspects of the proposed roadway?
Yes. They analyze everything from drainage to environmental aspects to water management, bugs and bunnies, you name it. They study everything.
Okay. You just used the term pass-by traffic. What, from a transportation standpoint, what does that mean? What is pass-by traffic?
Pass-by traffic is traffic that's traveling, already traveling on the roadways that will stop by this use. Their destination is not this site. That they would it's a home to. So let's say you're driving from home to office, but you would stop by here on the way to the office, say to get gas, or to stop at the dry cleaner, or to stop at the convenience store to pick up something, or to stop at to drop off something at the UPS store on your way to the office or on the way to the doctor's office. It's not your destination use. So it's a convenience stop on your way to another destination.
So does the county look at the percentage or the number of trips that you suggest are pass-by trips and review that and approve, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they consider that, they don't consider that as new trips to the roadway network, so they don't make you count that as new trips to the road. They only make you count the new trips that you would add.
Okay. You indicated that Bayshore is a state road, so let me read you an objective from the comp plan and then have a question. Objective 18.2 says, all road improvements within the Bayshore community considered by the county will address the community's goal to maintain its rural character and give preference to alternatives that allow existing roads to function at their current capacity.
Which one did you just read?
18.2. Is FDOT subject to the county's comp plan about goals that they might have about maintaining existing cross sections or maintaining rural character?
No.
And I believe you said that the cross sections proposed by the state are not rural in character, they're urban.
Correct.
And I believe you described the state proposed improvements from Bayshore to Day Road 80 as urban as well, didn't you not?
State Route 31.
Because there's going to be flyovers and things like that.
Say that again now? Back up.
The proposed FDOT cross-section from Bayshore to 31, is that an urban or rural cross-section they have proposed?
This is an urban cross-section.
But when I get to 31 and I go south, is that an urban or rural cross-section they have proposed there?
That's an urban cross-section as well. And that they're doing a flyover at State Route 31 and State Route 80.
Again, very urban.
Yes.
When you submit your TIS to the county with the initial application, do they always accept what you propose, or do they ask questions during the sufficiency process?
No, they ask questions.
So you make revisions as you go along,
Yes.
but Lee County did ultimately accept your methodology and accept your report.
Yes.
And so the conclusions you had on the slide about the 3 segments that were level service C, that was reviewed and accepted by the county?
Correct.
And as the hearing examiner pointed out, if a road fails, a segment fails with or without you, that's not an impediment to zoning or a development order?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question, back to your site. The configuration of the road, Wells Road, is going to change dramatically according to these preliminary plans.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, so, but Wells Road is a county road.
Correct.
So if your trips generated indicate there should be a turn lane or something, you would still have to provide that, is that correct?
That's correct. We are still responsible for site-related improvements at our access drives.
Right, now, talking about Bayshore Road, I'm looking at that, you're saying potentially a signal at Pritchett and potentially a signal at Knoll?
Well, there's an existing signal at Knoll today, and it will remain signalized. And we're asking for a right-in, right-out, potentially at this location about here.
Well, I'm just wondering if they're gonna force you to have a joint access with your neighbor there, so maybe you
Yeah,
won't have an access there.
It'll be, we're asking for an access near our eastern boundary and it'll be shared with, it'll be about in this location.
So regardless, it's not gonna be a full access? It's
No,
gonna
it'll be a
right-in,
right-in,
right-out.
well, right now, there's no median on State Route 30, or on State Route 78, but with this configuration, it'll be a right-in, right-out, because there's a median. They will not give us a median cut. It'll be a right-in, right-out on State Route 78.
And potentially a reverse frontage road to
Yeah, if these properties develop,
the signal
yeah,
interchange.
if these properties develop and we have a cross-access to get over to Knoll Road,
So basically, it'll be an interchange. Function like an interchange would. But that's what you see at most interchanges,
Yes.
right? Okay. I don't have any further questions. I'm ready for the next witness.
thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Ron Inge, once again, just to summarize where we are, I would like to address one particular thing relative to this particular slide. This is still in the preliminary planning stages. As Mr. Treese mentioned, we've met with FDOT and talked with them about some alignment of that may bring it in and match right where our exit point would be.
I mean, to me, I look at this and it looks like a lot extra pavement for no reason. Why wouldn't they just extend it due east and then?
That's one of the options that we suggested they consider, and it's still under consideration, but it's not finalized at this point. So that's one of the things that we were strongly in favor of as well. But as you mentioned, and as Mr. Treese said, whatever happens here, whether this ever occurs or not, we'll have to address any turn lanes that are needed as part of our development plans.
But at this point, that's planned to be a signalized intersection, correct?
Yes, under the DOT's plans, yes. And we'll still have to put a turn lane in. If this never happens, we'll still have to address the turn lane issue.
Thank you.
Just in summary, and to go over briefly what our team pointed out, this area in the general interchange has been there for several years, well over 30 years. That designation is for use of the traveling public and local residents to provide things that they may need. The Bayshore area has changed significantly. Some of the information that you've seen, some of the presentations done by some of the folks that have spoken have indicated that. The property was zoned in 2006, 17 years ago, for a variety of uses. It didn't provide some uses that we're proposing that would assist the traveling public, and that is why we've asked for them. We're adding those uses to help fulfill those needs. Bayshore Road will be significantly improved in the near future. FDOT is working on those plans, as Mr. Treese talked about. As Mr. Taylor stated, much of the general interchange area has been taken for other uses that preclude the needs that the traveling public and the community may have for commercial and retail uses. The remaining acreage needs to have the intensity to service those needs. That's why we've asked for 125,000 square feet. As Kirk Martin mentioned, our uses are sensitive to the wellfield protection ordinance. We're fully committed to complying with those provisions as suggested by Condition 7. And our proposal is fulfilling plans and strategies adopted and approved by the county long ago to try to meet the needs of the area. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Madam Hearing Examiner, there's only 3 items that we have concerns with. The staff recommendation, that's the location of the drive-through facilities, which I provided our Exhibit 2 as a possible solution to address that. The square footage, that we're asking for 125,000 square feet versus the 87,500 that the staff has proposed. And Condition 8, dealing with the wall on the north side south of the preserve area. We just don't think it's necessary given the magnitude of the preserve. Other than that, we're in compliance or in concurrence with the staff recommendation and would ask that you favorably consider that. I would like to reserve the opportunity for either me or any member of our team to address any concerns raised by the staff or the public as we go forward. And that concludes our initial presentation.
Okay, thank you. I want to offer applicant an opportunity to supplement the record with replacement pages of your PowerPoint with the corrections that you had brought to my attention so that the version that goes to the board is accurate in all respects. Please do not give me the entire PowerPoint because I don't want to have to go fly spec all the pages. If you just provide me the pages that need to be substituted, my staff will make the adjustments and we will make that the official exhibit that then goes to the board. And members of the public, all these exhibits will be uploaded into the county website under this case. And if you have any interest to go take a look at it or refer to it between now and the final board hearing, it'll be available to you from your home computers. Good morning.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Adam Mendez. I'm a senior planner in the zoning section. I have been previously qualified as an expert witness with respect to the Lee County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, and would be seeking to be accepted as such for the purpose of this presentation.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. As a matter of housekeeping, I do have 3 exhibits I'd like to submit to you. The first of which will be staff PowerPoint presentation. The second will be a revised set of case maps, and by case maps, I mean attachment C of the staff report, which was the aerial, future land use, and zoning maps. There was an error depicting Pritchett as Lee Tanner Road, and these case maps address that. And the last exhibit is a compilation of public comments received to me via email, as well as a petition. This petition was mentioned in the staff report. I said I was going to submit this as an exhibit into the record. I have provided the applicant with copies of all of these exhibits.
Okay, I will label these. I will note that the staff report is considered staff exhibit 1, so the PowerPoint will be staff exhibit 2. The revised case maps, substitution for attachment C of the staff report will be staff exhibit 3. Staff exhibit 4 will be a compilation of public comments you received prior to hearing, as well as a petition.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Full page.
This is the PowerPoint, right?
PowerPoint. This is for notes, if you have some. Attachment C. Petition.
So staff exhibit 4 is a composite exhibit of the petition as well as emails received prior to hearing
That's correct.
from members of the public.
Okay, we have several staff members that are either in attendance here today or monitoring remotely, and I'd like to introduce them into the record. We do have Nick DeFilippo, is a senior environmental planner in the planning section who works with natural resources as sort of a liaison. We have Phil, always have a hard time pronouncing his last name, Galagli, who's a professional engineer and surface water manager with natural resources, and Lee Wurst, who's a supervisor with natural resources. Brian Roberts, professional engineer, is a planner in the planning section. Marcus Evans, professional engineer as well. He's a senior engineer with development services. Cameron Severson is an environmental planner in the zoning section, and Brandon Dunn, planning manager, planning section. All of these staff members have been previously accepted as experts within their respective disciplines in this forum. I'd like to start off by kind of delineating between what's existing, what's proposed, and what's ultimately deemed as appropriate by staff in the recommendation before you. We've touched on this earlier this morning with the applicant's presentation, but I just want to put this front and center. The existing approval is limited to 61,000 square feet, and the mixture of uses relatively are neighborhood commercial uses. There were several compatibility measures that were codified with the existing approval that I'll go over in detail, and I'll also distinguish how some of those are going away and some of those are not recommended to go away, namely the wall. The proposed development before us would amount to 125,000 square feet. Not every square foot is treated equally. The worst case scenario here, and this is based off of trip generation by the applicant's traffic impact analysis for the zoning case, is 125,000 square feet of retail commercial. So that's the worst case scenario here, and that's what's proposed in terms of the applicant's pursuit with this application. The mixture of uses transitions from what was approved, those neighborhood commercial uses, to more general interchange commercial uses that are recognized in the comprehensive plan and then codified in the land development code in respective districts.
So no hotel?
There is a hotel use in it, yes.
And that's part of the 125 square feet, 1,000 square feet.
The 125,000 square feet, as staff recommends and as staff sees it, does not detract from the hotel. The hotel is going to be based on rooms, and those rooms have an equivalency to how much retail square footage actually is taken up by that.
So under proposed, if what they build includes a hotel, it'll be less than 125,000 square feet.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, in fact, with the equivalency that was provided, which was 120 square feet of retail, is equivalent to one hotel unit. This recommendation, if you were to convert those 44 hotel units, which is a separate allocation, and add it to the retail, you'd have about 92,000 square feet of retail commercial area. It works the other way. You can take away from that 87,500 square foot allocation at the same rate to increase hotel rooms up to 125, which is what's proposed in the staff recommendation. If I did not remember that incorrectly, is 120 or 125.
The staff report says 125.
125, okay. Does that sound right to you guys? So
it's not 125,000 square feet of retail commercial and 125 hotel rooms.
no, I believe a worst case scenario with the hotel would be close to 115,000 square feet of retail commercial and 125 foot room hotel, because that rate at 120 square feet per hotel room would shave off what be
Okay.
14,000 square feet or so.
When you list proposed as 125,000 square feet of commercial, that's worst case scenario.
Right.
The whole project goes retail, no hotel.
That's correct.
That would have the greatest impacts in terms of compatibility and traffic and everything else.
Yeah, and more particularly, those equivalencies were based on trip generation. So, but I would agree that that's the worst case scenario that we're going to discuss here.
And then your recommendation is in between the two here.
That's correct, yes. It's about 10,000 square feet per acre, which is it was evaluated in the staff report. We looked at interchange areas, specifically the general interchange area. As you know, there are several types of interchange areas throughout the county in different categories, but we looked specifically in the general interchange area, looked at similar approvals or similar PDs, and looked at the concentration of intensity that was encompassed in those.
So you applied an average of that square footage per acre to the acreage of this site when you arrived at this recommendation.
That's right. In fact, we went a little higher than the average. The average was around 8,700.
Right, and you went up to
10,000. That's
okay. So under the recommended scenario, it's 87.5 plus 44 hotel units.
That's correct.
If they don't do the hotel units, the 87.5 jumps up to.
It could go up to 92, I believe. I think it's just shy of 92,000 square feet. But the way that the recommendation is written, we don't have a way to work that way, to exchange those hotel units for additional intensity.
I see.
The recommendation does not consider using that as additional retail intensity. You can go the other way. You can build additional hotel units and reduce your retail intensity.
Okay.
Okay. This presentation outline is going to focus on the sequential order that we have been in for the past year and a half, roughly, since this case has started. So the case was submitted, I believe, in the summer of 2022. It was found sufficient in 2023, and a staff report was prepared and issued on September 26th of this year. In that staff report, there were some issues that were taken with the property's location in the wellfield protection zones, namely the 1 year and the 5 year, which the property lies within. And with that, staff recommended that several uses be stricken from the schedule of uses. Those uses were primarily uses that are contemplated in the interchange land use category. Service stations, convenience food and beverage store with fuel pumps, things of that nature. The applicant elected to utilize their continuance to work with staff. They retained a geologist. They met with natural resources in particular, which is the division of Lee County government that oversees these impacts and administers the wellfield protection ordinance. And they were able to come to an agreement with a condition, and I'm sure you've seen it's rather lengthy, a condition that works with county staff to establish some of those uses that were stricken. Two of the uses which remain off the table are truck stop, which would be something like you see directly on the other side of the interchange with the Love's truck stop, and laundry and dry cleaning, because of the chemicals and because of the substances that those uses might encompass or include in their operations, and the inability to regulate that. We're in agreement with that condition, and the 3 points we boiled down to, I'll touch on as we progress through this presentation. As you've heard in summary, it's the drive-through, which is a minor issue we can talk about. The location of the drive-through, which is simply just a carryover from the existing resolution. And then the other two issues are more important to staff in terms of intensity that's appropriate on this site, and whether the wall is a necessary compatibility measure to integrate increased intensity on this site. So starting with some findings that were made in the staff report, and starting really in a hierarchy when considering why this commercial development can come in and request additional square footage, and it starts primarily with its future land use category, as we've heard at length. It's in the general interchange. On the inset here on the right, you can see that it's really on the easternmost extent of the Bayshore interchange. And that interchange is subject to a very specific policy. I think we've heard it paraphrased here today, and I'll paraphrase it once again. It's for uses that are intended primarily to serve the traveling public, but by virtue of its location, a broad range of other non-residential land uses are permitted, including multifamily dwelling units, separate from that range of commercial units. Another key finding in this case, and something that should be expanded on, is Goal 18, the Bayshore Community Plan. We've heard a lot today about how the community is changing and how it's grown since 1989 or since the community plan was adopted in 2003. And I'd like to put on the record that while it's grown largely in compliance with the future land use categories and the rules and regulations that have been in place and contemplated as part of that goal. We talk about bright water, we talk about these RPDs that have laid dormant since the recession that are now waking back up. They are being built in compliance with the future land use that was contemplated during this goal. So Bayshore, while there's more dwelling units being added, it is really growing just in compliance with what was envisioned here. And what the vision is here at the top is to protect the existing rural residents, agricultural and equestrian-oriented character of the community by maintaining low residential densities, minimal commercial activities, and exclude incompatible uses that are destructive to the character of this rural residential environment. The word minimal commercial activities may come up, and rural, and everyone has a different shade of what that means. And so I'll offer staff's opinion on this matter and how staff believes that increasing the intensity on this project from approximately 6,700 square feet per acre to 10,000 square feet per acre is warranted, is appropriate. And that's because minimal commercial uses and the goal is expanded on in terms of land use in the objectives that follow, the objective and policy that follow, particularly policy 18.1.1 and 18.1.2, which really lay out specific areas where minor commercial uses are permitted, which I might add, I have a definition here, we can't see all of it, but minor commercial uses would also allow retail uses. So it is true that retail uses are allowed outside of the general interchange area. They're just limited to minor commercial, and they're further limited to very specific locations. I have an illustration here on this next slide, and it actually depicts those areas subject to policies 18.1.1, 18.1.2. I will mention that this area here was just added to show the North Fort Myers side of the general interchange limitations. It is not subject to those policies. It is in its own community plan. But if I work from west to east, west to east, you'll see the interchange area, and then you start seeing these nodes where minor commercial activity was recognized and allowed by that policy, and minor commercial activity, again, 30,000 square feet or less in gross floor area, and may include retail. So if we look just at the interchange area on this next slide, we'll recognize that as the applicants testified and as staff is evaluated, there's about 81 gross acres of general interchange when we think about that land use category and how it plays a role in the Bayshore community at large. And of that 81 acres, the total land area of Bayshore is approximately 14,750 acres. So if you consider 81 acres out of 14,750 acres, that's about 0.5% of the total land area in Bayshore where retail is permitted at levels greater than minor. So with that being said, intensifying commercial uses within a compatible spectrum on these properties is contemplated by Goal 18 when it says minimal commercial uses. Because minimal commercial uses ensures that commercial doesn't occur outside of these areas, and that anything greater than minor commercial is located to this busy interchange area. So staff finds that the recommended increase in intensity is justified and is still minimal when we look at the context of the community at large. You may recall this graphic from the applicant's presentation. They provided staff this presentation to justify concentrating commercial intensity on the subject property. And while I would say that the Potash Creek watershed and surrounding wetlands certainly hamper the ability to develop these lands, I would note that these lines are likely to be anecdotal and not scientific in nature, and that all this net development area that's categorized here could rely on these environmentally sensitive areas to provide their open space, to provide their indigenous preservation requirements, so that they could cluster their development on lands that was not environmentally sensitive. So it's not as if that land is wasted here. It does serve a purpose. It can serve a purpose for commercial development should that occur in accordance with the future land use. The property's current commercial plan development was tied to several conditions to promote compatibility back in 2006, 2007, one of which we see here. It's an exhibit. It's an artist illustration of what the main building should look like, plus or minus some conditions that actually further restrict building height to 1 story and 25 feet. The master concept plan for this existing development is located right here on this slide, and it shows where the main building would be and 2 or 3 out parcels here for some minor commercial development over there. I think 8,000 square feet was allocated to each building. Generally, the water retention or surface water management areas and preserve area are largely the same with the existing master concept plans that are subject to this request here. I will note that, as I say in sequence, this was requested at 99,000 square feet in 2006 through the hearing examiner hearing. It was reduced to 71,000 square feet. And then at the Board of County Commissioners, it was further reduced to 61,000 square feet at that time. What I'm saying here is really we've got a really predictable development program, and predictability lends itself to compatibility. What we're aiming for, and I understand the point, is we're aiming for some more flexibility. We're aiming to get rid of some conditions that confine this from being able to be marketed in a wide range of ways. And so we have a couple master concept plans. Master concept plan A, which shows a subdivision detail where we have what is depicted a hotel 4 stories tall, what appears to be a convenience food and beverage store, fuel canopy, and car wash, and a mixed-use building or building that would support uses that have been deemed appropriate north of that 400-foot setback line. Concept Plan B is a major box store brand, large box store brand. Some may call it a junior box store brand, but the size and the scale of this is actually pretty significant if you consider that it has a 2-story limitation and that the applicant is requesting 125,000 square feet. So this would be a situation where the entire site was developed with 1 box store building, and the access points are relatively the same across both sites. On this next slide, I do have some natural resource testimony I'd like to offer from Nick DeFilippo regarding the condition in the staff report that's relative to the groundwater monitoring and surface water monitoring that you had some questions on prior to.
My understanding, though, is that condition number 7, you've reached an accord.
We have.
Wording of that.
We have, that's correct. This would be more for the public, and if you have any questions.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Nick DeFilippo. I'm with the Lee County Planning Section. So I just wanted to come up here and say that we have worked with the applicant on this, and we've come to an agreement on condition 7. Staff believes it's very comprehensive, and implementing this condition will ensure compliance with Goal 63 and Goal 125 of the Lee Plan. If you have any questions, available to answer them, but we do believe that it ensures compliance with the Lee Plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The applicant's environmental consultant did discuss the future land use and covers classification system that they use to map out this property. And what I have here, just to orient yourself, we're looking from approximately right here on Wells Road into the property, as from the grade of Wells Road. Here you can see some telephone pedestals. Those are about 3 feet high, just for context in terms of how high the saw palmetto and some of the exotics are in this understory here. And you can also see really a dominant, I wouldn't say a dominant, very little subcanopy. Primarily you have just the, I'm drawing a blank here, but primarily you're just looking right over the top of this, and this is about 3 feet high right there. And that's going to play into the next slide as we discuss where the grade of this development will be because of its flood zone, where the parking lot might be in conjunction with this indigenous preserve that we've heard that is bolstered as this exceptional buffer, this exceptional vegetative matter that's located in the 75-foot wide preserve. And we'll also discuss what was approved and kind of how it's different from what is proposed. So to start off, we did recognize some classification systems and some community legends, pine flatwoods with anywhere from 0 to 25% exotics. Over here close to where the abutting low-density residential is, and then over in the mixed upland hardlands, we have anywhere from 25% to 49% exotic. So there's going to be some removal here, and in that, there was a deviation requested for removing a type C buffer that's required at the property line, separating the preserve from the north property line, so essentially to take those plantings and just supplement in the preserve. So losing a little room about 8 feet from the distance from the north property line as this indigenous preserve is shifted flush up against the utility easement. And the plantings that were approved between the preserve and the north property line are now going to be supplemented in some sort of equivalency fashion as conditioned in deviation 6. So there's a change in terms of the total area that's going to separate the north property line from where development potential can occur. In this detail, which is Exhibit D of Resolution Z06-046, which is the Bayshore Village approval that is currently in effect, you can see this detail also included a wall. It's an 8-foot wall. It's located approximately right here. And you can see the parking bumper here at that time where they projected the surface of the parking might be in terms of the location of the indigenous preserve area grade. And if you kind of glean on that and you look at just really how low a lot of this is and how much of this might be removed, you can kind of see some concern, or at least maybe understand the concern from staff with not only the actual screening that will be accomplished through this buffer that's being reduced ultimately with this indigenous preserve functioning as the buffer, but the location and the circulation of vehicles, which isn't conditioned in any manner other than the master concept plan depicting where buildings and parking lots can be. So there's concerns regarding headlight trespass, there's concerns regarding sound attenuation, and that this wall detail is an enhancement to this particular area where it's expected to protect the rural residential area north on Wells Road. Would recognize that we're not talking rural future land use, we're talking the actual existing use right now at time on the property, and that's actually recognized in Objective 18.1 of the County Comprehensive Plan when it distinguishes rural and urban land uses.
So you're recommending the construction of an 8-foot wall for the width of the property in this location?
Yeah, in fact, it's really retaining the existing condition that has that.
Right, and how many feet of wall is that?
I'd be throwing out a guess here. Do you have an idea of the
614 feet.
614 feet from across the property?
And understanding that that's an existing condition of approval, did you consider replace another option for that to ensure opacity, like a double hedgerow or additional trees at the edge of the developed space to accomplish that versus a masonry wall for that distance?
Well, the consideration, it was an idea of considering that this is currently a compatibility measure. We're looking to vastly increase the intensity on site of this project, but we'd like to decrease compatibility measures to some extent staff agrees with the removal of the type C buffer. So we think retaining that wall will be a sure safeguard to creating a sound transition from what will be a very intense and unparalleled commercial development that has nothing in comparison or approved, and the residential property on the north side of this property and so forth. So
Okay.
don't see really an equivalency with vegetation only. I believe I have Marcus Evans here with transportation just to talk about the staff memorandum regarding traffic impacts and the purview that the county looks at this, and especially in the zoning context. Maybe offers some clarification.
Thank you.
This is the
Good morning, good afternoon, good noon. I really don't know what it is. We're real close.
We're high noon right now.
All
Mark,
right.
I'm just checking for the record. Were you here earlier and sworn?
I was, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Marcus Evans, I am an engineer with Lee County Department of Community Development. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Florida. I've been sworn in and I have been accepted in the past as an expert in this forum in transportation planning and traffic engineering, and wish to be accepted today as well.
Please proceed.
Okay, you've heard that before. All right, I just wanted to reiterate some points that were already mentioned by Mr. Treesh and summarized in the memo that our staff produced after reviewing the traffic analysis for this project. The traffic study was reviewed based on the current county criteria for zoning traffic analyses. It also, the traffic analysis considered the most intense use of the property. In addition to that, based on the analysis, we noted that there were to be expected significant impacts on a number of roadways in this area, specifically Bayshore Road, Pritchett Parkway, and Knoll Road. And when we looked at or the applicant looked at the intersection analyses, noticed that the intersections in that area, Bayshore Road and Pritchett Parkway, Bayshore Road and Wells Road, as well as the south and west accesses, we're going to encounter some delay, in fact, some significant delay, specifically the accesses along, or the intersections along Bayshore Road. And the primary reason for that is the high volume of traffic on Bayshore Road, the fact that it's a two-lane roadway at its current configuration or current design. So specifically, there would be significant delay for the southbound approach. It's always difficult when you have a local road intersecting a major arterial road and trying to make a left turn out, and if there's not enough turn lanes or not enough gaps for that traffic to enter the higher volume road, then it is going to add to the delay at that intersection. So that can be expected with the current design. But there is hope, and we look forward to when FDOT completes their design of Bayshore Road, that they'll make some excellent safety and operational improvements to that roadway and to these intersections that are in close proximity to the site. It's also good to note, and it was mentioned prior, that the final project will be evaluated at time of local development order, and any required site-related improvements will be incorporated into that design as well. So that concludes my testimony. If you have any questions.
Well, my concern was when I read the attachment in the staff report with staff's analysis of the intersections, which, as I recall, were going to fail with the project and not without the project. The companion TIS did not seem to mention that, and I'm wondering what type of improvements would be required if they came in for a development order with that landscape
Right,
prior to the improvements, funding of improvements to Bayshore?
right. We would evaluate the design and the estimated trips based on our current traffic study guidelines, the turn lane policy, and they would be required to comply with those directives and build turn lanes at the site accesses. In particular, Bayshore Road is a state-maintained road, so it would be up to the state's discretion as to what improvements are required on Bayshore Road. But as far as the access on Wells Road, then that would be under our purview, and we would examine and determine whether turn lanes would be needed at that access point. As far as the intersection is concerned, there is some assumption, again, that the state's project's going to make some improvements at the intersection there of Wells Road. But depending on the level of traffic that the site would produce, we may or may not require improvements on Wells Road on the southbound, or be the north leg, you might say, of where Wells Road and Bayshore Road intersect.
Right, but two of the intersections were not adjacent to the site.
Say that again?
In the staff report, there was an analysis of impacted intersections by virtue of the planned intensity, and there were 3 failing intersections.
Correct.
So my question to you is, they come in for a development order, and the trips show 3 failing intersections, only one of which is adjacent to the site.
Right.
What is it? What's their mitigation? Is there a conclusion that the road impact fees that they pay adequately mitigates the impacts to those intersections? Are they going to be expected to do more? What happens there?
If our current criteria require those improvements to be made, they would be required to make those. However, if there are other intersections in close proximity that are affected by the development that they're not required to make improvements for, the road impact fees, you're correct, would be assumed to potentially be able to make improvements. Road impact fees specifically are intended to make capacity improvements, not so much intersection improvements, but they could free up funds for Lee County DOT to make improvements at intersections.
Well, I'm going back to the fact that the county study showed 3 failing intersections by virtue of this project's traffic. So, and they did not fail without the project.
Correct.
So, at the development order stage, something has to be done. And my question is, what would have to be done for this project to move forward?
We would look at those intersections based on our current criteria. In the traffic study guidelines, basically, as I recall, we would look at intersections if they are contributing, if the site would generate more than 300 new trips, we would look at nearby intersections, or specifically the nearest intersection, and if they contribute more than 25% of the traffic to that intersection, then we could require them to make some improvements to that. The challenge here is that you have such high volumes on Bayshore Road that the contributing traffic, the entering traffic, that intersection, as compared to the existing traffic and the traffic that we're going to see at time of build out, very well is going to be higher than much higher than the traffic generated by the site, such that they won't reach that threshold of being 25% or more of the entering traffic up at that intersection.
Okay, well, it's very confusing in the staff report.
Can I ask
What
a
am I
question?
supposed to do with that information?
Marcus, let me ask you a question if I could. It's my understanding, which may not be correct, that Wells Road doesn't meet the current county standards.
That, I have not evaluated that, but I believe you're correct.
And based on your understanding of the land development code, if it doesn't meet today's standards, would they be required to improve the road from their northernmost access
Correct.
to Bayshore?
Correct, yeah. So if it's not wide enough or the pavement depth or pavement structure is not adequate, then they would be required to make those improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is it's going to be looked at development order stage, and if there has to be mitigation, there'll be mitigation. That's your response?
That's the bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to the second point I have regarding the disagreement between the staff recommendation and what the applicant is proposing. I'll slow down, sorry about that. So first we'll define intensity as is defined in the LEED plan and as well in the land development code. And intensity is a measurement of the degree of non-residential uses of land based on use, size, impact, bulk, shape, height, coverage, sewage generation, water demand, traffic generation, and floor area ratios. So there's a lot of different ways to measure intensity. It's not just vehicular, it could be the bulk of the structure. So there's a very dynamic definition here to contemplate what intensity means when considering development. When we look at these master concept plans, they are to scale as they're required to be. And I'll start with A, which is on the right-hand side here. We don't really see a scenario in A where 125,000 square feet is ever built, at least with this master concept plan. We have to consider that this 4-story hotel building won't detract from the 125,000 square foot allocation at a 1 square foot to 1 square foot rate. It's based on rooms, and that equivalency, again, doesn't really make a large dig into the entitlements that they're seeking. So with what we're looking at right here, we're far below what 125,000 square feet of retail would look like on this site. On B, however, we have a scenario where we could actually envision 125,000 square feet of retail. And that's with the footprint of this building being about 82,000 square feet. So we need more than 50% of this building to have a second story of retail floor area in order for us to reach about 125,000 square feet of retail. So the question is, what does that look like? And so I have some tangible examples for you to consider. And some of the things I'd hope that you'd pay attention to, or want you to pay attention to, is where they are contextually, how much land they were built on, and what their entitlements were. And so our first example is going to be Bass Pro Shops. Bass Pro Shop is in Gulf Coast Town Center, and it is approximately, and this is out of the frame unfortunately, but it's approximately 125,000 square feet if you exclude the restaurant. The restaurant's only about 5,000 square feet. So if you're looking at Bass Pro Shop, which is a multi-level retail establishment, that's functionally what we're proposing here on this site. One of the key differences is that Gulf Coast is built in part with a DRI that establishes pretty wide retail gross floor area of over 1.5 million, but there's a condition in the DRI, and this is in resolution Z2020, that limits the maximum cumulative of 10,000 square feet of non-residential building per non-residential acre in the DRI. So we can assume that this 130,000 square foot floor area was built on at least 13 acres, and probably more to support the parking and other facilities necessary. Example 2 is going to be the Brookshire CPD, which is located at the intersection of 6 Mile and Daniels, I believe. Now, this was approved on 16.5 acres for 140,000 square feet. So almost double the land, close to 125,000 square feet, at a ratio about 8,400 84 square feet per acre, in lieu of the comparison we're making here to 14,200 square feet is what's proposed. Now, this was amended administratively to decrease open space and increase intensity with a Greater Pine Island transfer density unit, minimally 5,000 square feet of additional intensity and I believe 2,500 square foot reduction in open space. That would just nominally increase this to about 8,700 square feet per acre. But what's actually been built, and I'm sure many of us have patronized this establishment and know how busy it is, what's actually built right now is only about 108,000 square feet. And this is again on 16 acres. And you see where there's additional land here to build additional restaurant or retail or whatever's permitted in the schedule of uses. And if you can envision essentially what's developed here on 16 acres to date, crammed on 8.75 acres, almost half the land area, you can see some of the concern that staff begins to have with this type of intensity on this property in Bayshore, in a community that values preserving its rural character, but also promotes commercial, maybe in excess of minor commercial, at its interchange areas. So in summary, we're going back to what was approved, what's proposed, what staff's recommending, and staff finds that of the 3 disagreement points, the wall and the intensity, we would not recommend anything higher than 10,000 square feet per acre. We would not recommend increasing intensity on a site and reducing a compatibility measure that could have a long-lasting effect on property to the north. We would concede to the condition regarding the drive-through, as that was simply a carryover from the previous resolution. You'll see it in the schedule of uses. Drive-throughs were limited to the east side of the building, adjacent to commercial instead of Wells Road. That was at a time where convenience food and beverage stores were not regulated in the manner they are today, with additional buffers, additional lot sizes, setbacks, and in addition, the conditions that are contained and recommended before you, which the applicant doesn't have any disagreement with, would prohibit any deviations administratively. So we have no concerns with limiting or eliminating the restriction of the drive-through on the east side of the building. And so with that, I am available for any questions. We do have staff monitoring if you had any follow-up questions.
All right, thank you. I don't have any questions.
Do you want me to ask them now or after?
Yeah, ask them now.
Okay, page 16, that's your picture, your photograph.
I can't see the page numbers here, but let me.
Oh.
Is it Bass Pro Shop?
It's the vegetative
Okay.
picture. There, that's it.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, can you tell us where you were when you took that picture?
This is a photo from August of 2023, and it's from a Google Street View, and it's right about right here. In fact, this is the landmark you'd use to find it. So if you're looking into the property, it's actually closer to where this preserve area would be.
Okay, does the comp plan in the Bayshore area have any FAR ratio or square foot per acre?
They do not. No, the comp plan does not have that at all.
I beg to differ. If you look in the university community, that particular category does have a limit of 10,000 square feet per acre. It was based on the Arnold study and a lot of other things. I worked on that DRI, so that 10,000 square feet per acre was based on environmental consideration because it came out of the DRGR. So do we have any 10,000 square feet per acre in the general interchange?
It's not listed in the policy. Just to follow up on that, you said that was in the university community interchange or the university community, the distinct?
Yes.
So not the interchange?
Yeah, and we tried to pull the interchange down and they wouldn't let us.
Because the interchange isn't a portion of the property that I'm bringing up as an example. There's the interchange and then the transitions to the future land use category you're discussing.
We were required to have a 10,000 square foot per acre in the comp plan. So
Okay.
that's why it was 10,000 square feet per acre
Yeah.
in that particular project. Do you agree with Ms. Sapin that single-family uses are not permitted uses in the general interchange?
That's correct.
So that any redevelopment within that interchange, the only residential would be multifamily?
That's correct,
And it
without a
has
comprehensive plan map amendment.
With a
right.
base density of 8 units per acre, I believe, up to 14, and then you can have bonus. Is there an FAR ratio anywhere in the county's regulations where there's a FAR ratio requirement or limit?
And you're talking in the context of the land development code or
Yeah,
county
land
regulations at all? Land development code, I'm not aware of any Florida area ratios, no.
I wasn't either, that's why I
Yeah.
was asking.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, during your testimony, you made a comment about your concern of headlights. In the original, and you were doing that in context of the preserve, that's where we were. Do you agree with Ms. Sapin that the access point into the project under the current proposed map to concept plan is further south, further away from the single family to the north?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm sorry, let me go back. So we're talking about this access as opposed to it being closer to where the indigenous preserve is?
Yeah, that it was moved further away, so there'd be less.
Yeah, I think that was a good compatibility measure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. If that concludes staff's presentation, I'm going to break now for lunch.
Okay, thank you.
We will return at 1:30, and we will commence with public input. I will start with this packet. If you haven't filled one out yet, please, I urge you to do so and just place it in this bin here. If I get through all the names, I still will invite people who may not have filled this out to come forward. But please, I urge you to fill this out only because you give us a way to send you a copy of my recommendation and to provide you with notice of the final board hearing. Thank you. I'll see everyone at 1:30.
I remember the window for the sign